The Blast from Our Past Network.
Lock your doors, close your windows, turn out your lights, for chills and thrills await you. It's time for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Stay with a friend, say your prayers as grisly ghouls close in to seal your doom. Tonight's episode, Devil Times 5, aka Peopletoys, starring Gene Evans, Leif Garrett, and Sorrell, Booke.
Hey, Corey, guess what?
What, Zach?
We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of one of the most terrifying movies ever made. Do you know what that movie is?
Are you talking about Peopletoys?
Well, yeah, I thought you were going to say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but yeah, I'm talking about Peopletoys, a.k.a. Devil Times 5, a.k.a.
The Horrible House on the Hill.
Yes, a.k.a. the movie that has snow in it. So, according to Corey's database, it is a Christmas movie. So, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Snow, snow. And yes, that is a White Christmas reference.
Never seen it.
No!
Corey literally just jumped out of his chair. No, I'm kidding.
I have actually, I watch it every year, and I've actually seen the White Christmas play at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C.
I'm very happy for you.
Moving on.
Yes, and moving on to something that is none of those things, but is probably one of the most bonker films we've ever covered on Podcasting After Dark. Devil Times 5, Peopletoys, horrible thing that happened down the street last Tuesday. Your
on
neighbor
the Hill
is
House.
Yeah, exactly. Children shouldn't play with dead things unless, well, maybe I guess they do play with dead things in this movie.
Yeah, they actually do. Okay. And a movie that Quentin Tarantino apparently loves as well.
He sure does. I love this movie simply because I have a very long history with it of about 3 months ago.
Yeah. You had another movie picked for your December pick that was also a pseudo Christmas adjacent film. Although I would say this is probably more appropriate. But yeah, you called an audible like basically a month ago.
I did. Late October. I went to the Horror-thon at the Santa Monica Aero Theater. American Cinematheque puts on a annual 7 or 12-hour show from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. the following day. Good friend of the 80s Kids Unite, $2 late fee. Grace was there. Grace Marion, who was on our 80s Kids Unite episode this month. You should check it out. Amongst other people, Dustin and Aaron. His wife Erin went as well. And the first screening of the night was Species. The second screening of the night was Devil Times 5, much to everyone's shock and horror. And I had never seen it. And within 15, 20 minutes of the movie, I'm like, I don't know why I like this movie, but I really like this movie because it's so weird. It's probably one of the weirdest movies we've ever covered on this podcast as well. And by the end of it, I'm like, I got to cover this movie. This has to be the movie I cover for my December pick on Podcasting After Dark. Obviously, we just covered Crystal's pick, Christmas Bloody Christmas earlier this month. And now we're covering my pick, my quote unquote holiday film. And I'm like, you know what? It takes place in snow. It's in Southern California. I'm in Southern California. I'm not in snow, but I'm in the festive mood. Let's cover Devil Times 5.
Yeah, dude. I mean, there's nothing saying in the movie that it doesn't take place in maybe December or something like that. So, yeah, I again, as far as our parameters go, sometimes Zach likes to do, Christmas proper movies that are adjacent, like Invasion USA, which, actually takes place on Christmas. Or we cover stuff which we've done in the past, like The Thing. We cover that around Christmas time because it has snow in it. And my criteria for a Christmas movie, it's either a Christmas movie or it has snow in it, So I'm fine with that. I am A-okay with this being our holiday pick. And as far as my experience with Devil Times 5, I feel like I heard that Quentin Tarantino quote at some point. I can't remember if it was this year or last year or whenever he made that quote. I feel like it came across my dude, we're on, Instagram and everything, and all the people that we follow, Tarantino stuff always pops up. So I think I somehow it came across my, my screen at some point. But other than that, I had no, familiarity with this film whatsoever. And then like I'm watching it, and I kind of was like, oh yeah, I was explaining to my wife, like, oh, Leif Garrett is in it. And I was like, I think he was in the Partridge Family. And then I'm going through his IMDb, and I'm like, no, he wasn't in the Partridge Family. And I'm like, why do I know Leif Garrett so well? Like, why do I know the name Leif Garrett, whereas I've barely seen anything that he's actually in? Is it just because you couldn't escape the 80s without Leif Garrett being sort of in the zeitgeist?
Nah, he was a pinup, teen beat personality. I'd lump him into that with like David Cassidy, who was on the Partridge Family, obviously. He was a singer. He was a pop star. He was in movies as well. Had a vicious heroin addiction, which I believe he's clean and sober now for quite some time, which is great. I'm very happy for that. He was in a movie called Thunder Alley with Jill Schoelen. That we talked extensively with Jill Schoelen about Thunder Alley when we had her on $2 late fee. Gosh, that was last year. Holy cow. Leif Garrett he's one of those like pop culture iconic, teeny bop kids who went down the wrong path, the dark path, but has lived to tell the tale. So
that's kind of like isn't Bonaducci sort of like that as well, where he went down the dark path but then sort of kind of survived it essentially.
Yeah, and I could be wrong about the heroin addiction, but he definitely had a drug addiction, and I believe he might have been on one of those VH1 shows where they try to get off stuff or whatever, talked about it. All of those guys seem to, unfortunately, so many child actors fall, down that dark road. But after seeing this movie, kind of makes sense why he might fall down that dark road, because this is a dark AF film.
It is really dark film when you think about it, and a lot of some of the actors in here have done some interesting stuff, and obviously we'll get into that. But let's roll it back a little bit. I probably jumped the gun on the Leif Garrett discussion. This movie was fraught with problems, mainly from the director's end of things. He apparently only filmed about 4 weeks of the stuff. The Lake Arrowshead stuff is what he filmed, and then apparently he got fired from the film, and then some of the pickup shots and the reshoots, he didn't film that stuff, and there's all kinds of other weird, bizarre things. Like Leif Garrett has shorter hair in some of the scenes, which I think are all the pickup shots. The later, the reshoot stuff is when Leif Garrett has shorter hair. So they kind of put him in a wig to kind of try to match the other scenes. And like, it's like, so implying that the rest of the movie, he's like sort of has a wig on the whole time, even though it's clearly his natural hair. And then, like the movie also came in sort of under runtime, which is why you see a lot of slow-mo shots in this movie. Infamously, there's one scene that is a 5-minute slow-mo scene, and it's there to pad out the runtime, because this thing barely makes it in at, I think, 88 or 89 minutes. And so they really had to pad it to get it up to that close to 90-minute theatrical run. And then on top of it, you have the 3 different titles. The movie was shot as Peopletoys. That was that was the name of it when it had its first run release of in the theaters. And then a few months later, they released it again in the theaters as The Horrible House on the Hill. Still doesn't really make any money. And then a separate production company buys it a year or two later, re-releases it, I think in 76, because this came out in 74, re-releases in 76 under the title that we all know now as Devil Times 5, because I think that's what hit the VHSs and all that kind of stuff. And what it was on TV was Devil Times 5, and that's sort of how we all know it, although it's funny because the IMDb page calls it Peopletoys.
Calls it Peopletoys. Vinegar Syndrome put out a beautiful 4K Blu-ray transfer, calling it Devil Times 5.
Yeah.
With, the original art, I think, is on the inside, the reverse slipcover. Code Red, there's a Code Red Blu-ray out there, which basically has the exact same extras, if you can find that one. And yeah, this movie is controversial to say the least. And I love doing controversial movies or things that are like, what are we watching here? It's very weird. It's a very weird film, but it's also unique. Like, I don't think I've really seen anything quite like it before or since.
Yeah, because what I personally think makes it interesting and unique, and I'm with you, buddy. I watched this and I was like, oh, I love this movie. It's right up my alley. I like the vibe. I like the look. I actually liked all of the characters. I think they're very fleshed out. The movie's very, like 90% of the movie is sort of character development, and then it all sort of comes to a head in like the last 20 minutes of the film. But I think that it's time well put, getting these characters, making them interesting, but, you know, the main sort of the adults in it. But then you have the kids who, it's funny because they don't act like little demons. They act just like kids. And then you juxtapose it with what they do in the film. And obviously we'll get into all the gory kills and whatnot. And it's like, it almost makes it scarier because they're not acting like Village of the Damned. They're just acting like normal kids, maybe save for David, you know, Leif Garrett's character. They try to do some stuff with him, and I kind of don't think it really pans out as much as they want it to. But all the other kids seem just like normal kids, and that's what makes the kills freakier.
Yeah, I'd say Susan. I'd say Susan is one that flips at one point. You know, we can get into that as well. But you're right. Like, for the most part, they just seem like normal kids who clearly are not.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into the cast and crew and all that good stuff of Devil Times 5? I'm glad you gave everybody a little bit of backstory on the controversy behind the production of it. I'm going to go out of order of what IMDb has as the cast, and I'll kind of hit who I think are the main characters first. Gene Evans plays Papa Doc. This guy, this
motherfucker
guy,
this fucking guy. I love him. I fucking love him. He's a man's man.
He is a man's man. He's been in a lot of big time movies. Operation Petticoat with Cary Grant, Tony Curtis, Ace in the Hole, like a lot of old 50s films, you know. He passed away in 1998 at the age of 75. A lot of movies. He looks like he was working up to, 1989, basically. But it dates back all the way to the 50s, his career.
Yeah, he's one of those old school kind of actors. He has like an old school look about him and everything. But yeah, I can totally picture him in some sort of, war movie, some Western films, which of course that's what he's in. And then of course, come the 70s and the 80s, it kind of segues into, he'll do an episode of Fantasy Island. He'll do an episode of Charlie's Angels and stuff like that. Like a lot of these, Vegas, and things like that. Like a lot of these older actors do, which, us doing this show and us doing TV Obscura, it is interesting to see how many people go through some of these old shows, like Charlie's Angels and like Vegas and, Matt Houston and, stuff like that. Like, you realize that a lot of those old shows really kept a lot of these old actors employed.
They sure did. And I want to point out one TV movie, which I believe was the pilot for a potential series, and we may need to cover it on TV Obscura. It's called Travis McGee. He was the second lead on that next to Sam Elliott, who played Travis McGee. Also starred Richard Farnsworth and Jeffrey Lewis and our boy Marshall Teague. So
yeah, there we go.
Don't be surprised if Travis McGee shows up on TV Obscura down the road. So he plays Papa Doc. Taylor Lacher, or Lacher, I'm going to say Lacher, plays Rick, probably the greatest, oddest hairline I've ever seen on a guy in a movie. He passed away in 2005 at the age of 63, but he was in a movie called Mr. Majestic.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Charles Bronson movies of all time.
And of course, a movie that I think gets referenced in True Romance. It's another Tarantino film, that he loves, a personal favorite of his. He was also in 1979's, I think it was a made-for-TV movie called Day of the Assassin with Chuck Connors from Werewolf that we talked about
nice.
couple years ago on TV Obscura.
An oldie but a goodie. Werewolf always comes up on our show.
It does. And that's how David Ullman found us. So
Right?
So real quick, I do want to call out the fact that, so I did the math, Taylor Lacher is 32 in this movie. Actually, when they probably filmed it in 73, they said. So he was 31 at that point. Dude, he looks like he's fucking 40. He looks like he's older than me now, and I'm 46. It's just so funny how different guys looked back in the 70s. Like, he looks like a man, but he's like 31 years old.
That's what happens when you don't take vitamins.
And your skin's all leathery and everything.
And you just eat meat.
He looks like a guy who just eats meat.
Give me that steak and a glass of scotch.
Yeah.
Do you want any water? There's water in my body already. Half my body's made out of water. It should be more than half. Whatever.
25%.
Yes, 25%. Whoo, baby. But he gets around like a record in this movie.
Yeah, he does.
Joan McCall plays Julie. She passed away in 2023, last year at the age of 83. She was in Grizzly.
Yeah, dude, Grizzly. That was a big one of my childhood. My buddy Luke had that taped off of TV at some point, so that was a movie I watched a lot as a kid.
Yeah, and apparently she wrote Grizzly Part 2.
The infamous Grizzly Part 2.
Yes.
We may have to cover Grizzly on this show, but we'll cover Prophecy before we cover Grizzly.
Yeah, we will. No doubt about that. Carolyn Stellar plays Lovely. And when I say lovely, I mean lovely.
And so she is the mom, the biological mother in real life of Leif Garrett and Dawn Lynn. So that makes some interesting scenes later a bit more awkward.
To say the least. I chose this movie for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love me some early 70s boobs, baby.
She passed away.
Actually, moving on. She passed away.
She passed away. Oh, killer, murder killer. She passed away in 2022 at the age of 87.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to guess that most of the older people are actually gone at this point.
Sadly, it is.
Sorrell Booke plays Harvey Beckman, but so he has a mustache in this, not recognizable for his most recognizable role. And what is his most recognizable role?
Fucking motherfucking Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard. And I'm watching this and I knew it's him. Like, I'm watching Harvey, the character Harvey, and I know it's Sorrell Booke. I don't see Boss Hogg at all until he's working out. There's a scene where he's working out and he does some kind of head mannerism, and I go, there it is. I see Boss Hogg right there. But I actually really liked Sorrell Booke in this movie. I thought he was pretty great.
He's a really good actor, clearly. I mean, he was great as Boss Hogg. He passed away in 1994 at the age of 64.
Yeah. You know, obviously Boss Hogg's his most memorable role, but I mean, he was a pretty prolific actor.
He sure was. Shelley Morrison plays Ruth. She passed away in 2019 at the age of 83. She was on Will and Grace for the longest. She played like Rosario on Will and Grace. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I would say, she's probably the most prolific actor in this entire film, and because she was working up until pretty recently, like 2013 and whatnot, and 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was doing a bunch of stuff. I mean, she's done like Fools Rush In. Like, she had some pretty big roles. But I will say that I was watching the behind the scenes, and the first AD, first assistant director, Walter Dominic, who's actually still alive, they met on this production, and he talks about how when they actually met each other at the she walked in the room and he said, we both of our eyes locked. It was like a movie, like our hearts started pounding, and I was like, that's really sweet. Like, they actually met on this production, and they stayed married, I think, up until she passed away. So I think that's kind of that's pretty sweet.
Well, that is sweet, and I wonder what did it for her. I wonder what did it for him. All the glasses of J&B she was drinking throughout the shoot.
Probably. He's like, wow, she can drink. Apparently,
can hold her liquor.
She was a bit of a prolific like besides, all the stuff that she's credited for on IMDb, she was pretty prolific for coming in and laying down scream tracks for people. So if they needed, because she had like this very blood curdling scream, and you hear it when her character Ruth burns at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert. But that's kind of one of the things she was sort of known for, and it would go like unaccredited a lot, but she would be called in to just basically punch up some screams and everything in ADR.
Well, she's good at it. So
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, she was.
Someone who's good at playing a simpleton kind of character is John Duran, who plays
I don't think you can
Ralph.
say simpleton anymore.
Oh,
I think
no.
you just got us canceled.
Oh, sorry. Lenny from Mice and Men.
Yes, a very Lenny type.
You can't say simpleton? What?
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Can you say, no, I'm not even going to say it. Okay, apparently you could say that. Yeah, he's just a nice guy. This is what happens when you play a nice guy. You get hung.
There you go.
You hang yourself. He passed away. He passed away. This is all about the episode of like who died. He passed away in 2003 at the age of 67.
Damn.
He's been in a lot of movies, maybe not the largest roles, but a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies, and I guess the next biggest one on his IMDb was Who Will Stop the Rain, not to be confused with the Creedence Clearwater song, but Nick Nolte and Michael Moriarty are in that, so there you go.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, he's this dude worked a lot, but yeah, a lot of TV shows, a couple episodes of Wonder Woman, Vegas as well, so
yeah.
These guys, you see a trend here.
You see a trend. Let's get to the kids, though. Let's get to the kids. Yeah, so Leif Garrett, I think a lot of people will know him from The Outsiders. He was one of the preppy guys, I think he was. I haven't seen The Outsiders in forever. I just remember him. Maybe he was. Anyways, he was in The Outsiders. Walking Tall with Buford Pusser. We're going to cover that down the road for sure. But
and
Leif
then I think
Garrett
he was in the remake of Walking Tall as well, probably just to sort of bring it back,
Right on.
I mean, he's also in Cheerleader Camp, but he, of course, did like a bunch of like TV stuff, Superboy TV series. But he was on an episode of Monsters, which I picked up the complete series DVD set from, was it Diabolique DVD?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I picked that up, and I've actually been watching it at night before I go to bed, and we covered it so long ago on TV Obscura. But I gotta say, like, watching actual, like, a lot of episodes, it's a really good show. Like, it's a fun little monster show. I have not gotten to Leif Garrett's episode yet, but he's on one episode of that.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, let me know how that goes, because I probably won't watch it.
but will you watch Gail Smale in her one and only role?
I know. Man. If ever someone you see on screen and you think probably something weird happened offset, she's one of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, the IMDb trivia of this is not very extensive, but there is an entry that alludes to the fact that she is basically albino in real life, and she was the director's underage girlfriend. Now, I watched a bunch of documentaries, behind-the-scenes stuff on the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, and multiple people have confirmed that she was the director's girlfriend, but no one has mentioned her age, and she doesn't even have her age on her IMDb thing. So that I can't confirm other than that one entry, and I know you saw it too, Zach, but that one entry on the trivia section of IMDb. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it does seem to be true that she was the director's girlfriend.
I think what's true is that she's really good at being really creepy in this.
Well, the albinoism doesn't really help.
Oh, yeah. Are we allowed to say that, probably? Whatever.
Now I'm canceled.
Dawn Lynn, who is Leif's sister, surprisingly, she was also in Walking Tall and Walking Tall Part 2.
Why not, right?
Yeah,
Bring
why
them all
not?
back.
She plays Mo. Mo, Don't Touch My Doll, Mo. She's great. I love her. She's awesome in this.
Yeah.
Probably one of the standouts of the kids is Tiare Turner, who plays Brian.
Who went on to have an extensive stunt career, who literally is still working today on stunts. But he also has done some like, on-screen stuff. But he was in The Crow, the original The Crow. Myra and I just watched it the other night because I got home and I was like, I haven't seen my 4K yet because it came when I was at home in Maryland with my mom. So I was like, let's watch that. He's one of the goons in the big shootout at the end, just a random goon that, Eric Draven guns down. I'm sure he was also there partially as a stunt person as well. But dude, his stunt resume is insanely extensive.
He probably knows Branscombe Richmond.
Probably does. But I mean, he's done like Star Trek Into Darkness. He did the Godzilla movie that came out in 2014. Like he said, he's Sons of Anarchy. Like he's still doing shit up until like Terminator Genesis. So he's still working today doing stunts.
Good for him. Good for him. Someone who is not doing anything anymore is Tia Thompson, who plays Susan. Again, this was her one and only role in Devil Times 5 / Peopletoys.
I can see that. Honestly, of all the kids, she was the least interesting. And like Gail Smale just had something about her, you know what I mean? This weirdness to her. Whereas, Tia was just kind of like, sort of there,
Yeah. Now, this is interesting. There's one more role. It's Dr. Brown. He is in this movie for 30 seconds. He's played by Henry Beckman, but I just want to remind you guys, Sorrell Booke, Boss Hogg, he plays Harvey Beckman. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of connection there, if it was an inside joke to call, I don't know, to call him Harvey Beckman.
Yeah, I don't know either. And it's weird because multiple actors actually play this character, because when he gets killed in that infamous 5-minute slowdown kill scene,
yeah,
that's a different actor than this guy, but it's the same character, which I'm telling you, man, the first time I watched this movie, I was so confused because it's obvious that the guy they kill is a different character, or a different actor. And I'm like, I don't understand what's happening there. And then Leif Garrett's hair changed constantly. I literally spent the entire first viewing of this film thinking that there were 3 little boys instead of 2 little boys in the movie. And don't get me started on who the fuck is George that Leif Garrett always refers to.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk about that, but then not talk about that.
So much to talk about in this movie.
There is, like you said, the director was fired midway through. Was that David Sheldon that was, or was that Sean MacGregor who was fired?
Sean MacGregor is the main director. He's the only name that'll show up on the movie, on the Blu-rays and everything, because he was a part of the DGA, the Directors Guild of America. So when he got fired, he had the whole backing of the DGA to kind of, fight for him. And even though, apparently the other guy, David Sheldon, sort of, I think he's a producer or whatever, kind of had to do the pickup shots and everything like that, it's only going to ever be Sean MacGregor's name on there because he was a DGA, part of the Directors Guild, and that's the deal that they worked out. But he hasn't really done much. And even the movie he went to go film afterwards, he got fired from as well. But I think Camper John is probably his next sort of biggest deal. And it was done by the same production company that did this, Devil's Times 5, so that's how he essentially got the Devil Times 5 job, because of Camper John, who also, Gene Evans was also in that as well.
Yeah, interesting. And David Sheldon, who, like you said, was not credited, has gone on to do more producing behind the scenes. He produced Just Before Dawn, which is a fun slasher movie, which will come up, I'm sure, on Podcasting After Dark.
He also produced Grizzly as well. But yeah, I think he was just a producer on this film as well, and just had to kind of do the duties of doing the pickup shots and everything.
He had to do the do.
He did.
But John Duran, who plays Ralph in the movie, wrote the screenplay. So there you go.
There you go.
Have fun with that, buddy.
You go do that.
So this film on many levels is interesting, because throughout this multiple screenings of it that I watched and breaking this movie down, I was like, where do they shoot that? Where do they shoot this? the fact that they shot all the snow scenes up in Lake Arrowhead was really special because I would go up to Lake Arrowhead all the time. It's beautiful, or down, I guess. It's south from here, southeast. But then some of the early scenes that were shot, like the city scenes early in the movie were shot in Los Feliz of all places, which I was surprised. I was like, that's probably Beverly Hills. Nope, it's Los Feliz, which looks nothing like that now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's awesome. And the snow in this is great. You know, obviously you guys all listened to Christmas Bloody Christmas last week. And, you know, one of the minor complaints that I had was that, you know, the snow is clearly fake. It's, you know, it's clearly sometimes foam, sometimes, you know, that fake snow that they use and everything, snow blowers or whatever. But here, I mean, this is literally packed snow. Now, there are scenes you will see that have like no snow coverage. That was the beginning of their filming, and apparently a couple of storms came in, luckily, towards the latter half. But anytime you see basically a shot of them and you see more grass and stuff, note that was kind of shot at the beginning of the production and everything.
Yeah, so strap in, get yourself a blankie, cuddle up on the couch, sit by a fire if you want to, and enjoy our breakdown of little children killing adults.
What more do you want for Christmas?
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, this is a warning to all you parents out there. You don't get your kids what they want for Christmas, this is what's going to happen to you.
They'll fucking kill you. Let's roll the trailer.
My friends and I were in an accident. We're the only survivors. It was quite frightening, crashing in the middle of nowhere. Because of my ingenuity, we survived.
Harvey!
We were on our way to Hollywood when it happened,
Oh, so you're an actor.
among other things.
The safest thing to do is stay together in one room, start out in the morning.
Did you read that someplace?
Why don't you figure out something better to do instead of sitting around sucking on that pipe and making smart-ass remarks?
We will be friends, Harvey Beckman.
Movie opens on a scenic winter road on the way to Lake Arrowhead with a melodic beat, very reminiscent of New Kids. You know, like that cheesy kind of made-for-TV movie music. I love it. In this case, I love it.
Me too. No, it's great. This thing is total 70s aesthetic, early 70s aesthetic, and I am a big fan of that. I mean,
Yes.
Dude, the older we get, like, I know that we love living in the 80s, and that's what we grew up in, but I do love 70s horror movies, and just 70s cinema in general.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally agree. This is a perfect example of a kind of movie that I love that didn't get made in the 80s. This grittiness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you see this winter road. You see a van driving down the road in the snow. Cut back to sunny Southern California, Los Feliz to be exact, while Julie's waiting with her bags packed on the stairs of a home, a big mansion. Rick arrives in a big old beast of a car, which he calls the gunboat. She asked what took him so long, and he said he had to get the car gassed up in antifreeze and chains. And she's like, why did it take you an hour? He goes, well, I ran out of gas on the way to the station. By the way, so Rick he doesn't have a comb over. He's basically he's got hair on the sides of his head, but no hair in the middle. And what he's done is he's kind of waved his hair on the sides inwards to make like wings. It's almost like if an eagle took its wings and it flopped them on top of itself. So it's like a V shape. It's amazing.
Dude, your description is so accurate. It's so correct. And he's got like this like blonde mustache and everything. And
yeah.
Here's the thing. It would look terrible on anybody, and it looks terrible on him, but he has such charisma. He has kind of such like gumption that it works for him. I still find him attractive. Like it still freaking works, even though it's clearly a comb over. So clearly a comb over.
Yeah, he's a really good actor. Like I don't know if we said this already, but everybody in this film is very competent.
Yeah.
There are definitely moments that feel improvised, but they just feel like they're having a good time. And clearly Julie and Rick are in love with each other. It's revealed that Papa Doc and the rest of the group are already up at Lake Arrowhead and basically waiting on them. Papa Doc is Julie's father.
Yeah.
Cut back to the yellow van driving in the snow. Not yellow snow with a white van, but a yellow van in the snow. This is all the credit sequence, by the way. This takes a really long time. It's almost like 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the van swerves off the road, and in only the way I can describe it, it is a horrible car crash that looks very realistic. Very realistic. There's clearly no one in the van when it rolls off the side of the road, but maybe there is, and I'm just hoping there's no one in the car.
Yeah, no, it's a great car crash. Now I did wish we saw who was in the van, because
you
don't
see
really,
one guy driving at one point.
You only see one guy driving.
That's probably George, by the way.
Okay, maybe that is George. That would be interesting. I will say that I do wish we could see the kids in the van, because the van, once it kind of flips upside down, becomes a bit of a clown car as people start coming out of it. Even later on with the doctor sort of, emerging as well. I'm like, how many fucking people are in this? It's almost like this is when you realize you wish they had establishing shots and stuff like that. But as far as the actual crash itself, fantastic roll. That thing rolls down a hill, and you can tell they have multiple camera coverage on it, and it works and everything. My another only gripe is I hate the sped up Mad Max footage at the beginning when they kind of go careening out of control. And I always refer to that sped up style footage as sped up Mad Max style, because as a kid, that was the first time I ever saw something like that. And to this day, I never like it. You can just tell it's a false sense of speed where it's not really happening, but it is what it is, but the payoff is amazing. The crash itself is amazing for a low budget film.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed when I found out that, kung fu movies back in the day were a lot slower the way they fought. They just sped up the film afterwards. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so they're okay. I mean, it's still cool and all, but it's not as cool.
Right, which is when you go now and watch a movie like The Raid or something where they don't speed things up, that's why you realize, oh my God, that's why that movie is so freaking amazing.
Exactly. This isn't The Raid. This is Devil Times 5.
This is no Raid.
Cut back to Julie and Rick in the car, and Julie's kind of prodding Rick along to get along with her father, and Rick says, the only reason I'm going up there is to be with you, not for business. And he's like, why don't you just get off my back, okay? They're kind of bantering back and forth. They're playing. And Julie says, fine, Papa Doc and Harvey will take care of business. And Rick goes, oh, Jesus Christ, a weekend with Harvey. He's all right. His old lady, though, and he motions with his hands like, meh. And Julie says, we'll just give her a bottle of scotch with a nipple on it, and that'll keep her happy the rest of the weekend. They both laugh.
And I do like how Rick is not impressed by Papa Doc, and we'll get to that in a little bit, whereas clearly Papa Doc is someone that really commands a room, and I like how Rick is kind of like, I really don't give a shit.
Yeah, it'll be revealed later on that they're all working together to some degree, except for Julie, obviously, who's the daughter of Papa Doc. Cut back to the van. It's destroyed. The driver appears to be dead. I think he's dead. He's hanging upside down in the car. There's another person in the front seat that looks dead too, but they're not. We'll find that out in a moment. A little kid starts to crawl out of the van. It's It's Brian. He's checking on the man, and he steals the man's watch.
He makes a comment like people who drive poorly don't get medals or something.
Yeah, he says lousy maniac drivers don't deserve medals. And he steals the guy's watch, right? Cut back to Rick and Julie leaving their posh spot in Los Feliz. Cut back to the van, and one of the, I believe it's the nun in the front seat, is alive. And I'm like, she looks like a small child. Well, guess what? She is a small child pretending to be a nun. And she's saying the rosary prayer over the 5 kids that survived the crash.
So you want to hear my takeaway? Yeah. I think the nun in the front seat is actually dead. I think that was a real nun, like an adult nun. I think she either took the clothes or took just the habit or something like that. But I don't think that was supposed to be Gail Smale in the front seat. I think both the people in the front seat are technically dead. There's a lot of wonky. Apparently another reason the director got fired, they didn't have dailies on this because they were kind of filming out at Lake Arrowhead. They couldn't get them processed. he got fired because he didn't get enough coverage and because they felt like the movie was shot too much like a made-for-TV movie. That's what they say. I don't think the latter part is correct. I think he was more competent than that. But if you watch this whole first scene and the questions that we have in the first like 4 minutes of the movie, I think that was the director's fault and not getting coverage of who's in that car, establishing all that kind of stuff, you know?
Oh, yeah. They could have easily have done that.
Yeah.
Could have easily done that. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I totally agree with what you said here. Hannah, who's now the nun, Sister Hannah, she looks at Brian, and Brian gives her a salute and says, all persons accounted for, except for everyone else, that's flat dead. One of the other kids, Susan, says, that's not decent, Brian. Brian looks at the wreckage and finds a Swiss Army knife, and he gets excited about the fact that he now has a knife. One of the other girls, Mo, asks if they can go now to Hannah. 3 girls take the supplies from the van, and they walk off through the snow with Brian and David. You don't really see David at this point, but you will see him later on.
Yeah, and he kind of emerges during the scene. Like, he emerges after Brian says everyone's dead inside, and then sort of David comes out with his fly little suit on. And I'm like, Hannah probably shouldn't have been trusting, a 9-year-old to determine whether everyone was dead or not. And just so you sort of also know, Brian's kind of got this whole military thing going on. I mean, we all did it as kids. We went through our military phase, but he's an 8 or 9-year-old kid who's fully in his military phase right now.
Right, exactly. And that's all you're going to hear from him too, by the way.
Right, yeah. All kinds of like military jargon and stuff like that.
Yep. Cut back to Rick and Julie in the car listening to the radio on the weather report going up to the snow. And the weather report does say at one point the phone lines are down. So that's important to note as well.
Yeah.
Cut back to the kids leaving the van, and David yells, "I'm still alive. Get me out." That's when they find him.
Okay. Yeah.
He gets out of the van and they get to move on through the snow.
Yeah, that's. I knew he pops out somewhere, but yeah, he's got a fly little suit on and everything. He looks cool.
I love it. Cut back to Rick and Julie driving through the snow, and at this point, the snow is thick, and this big beast of a car with its chains on is just plowing through the snow. There's no sped up Mad Max camera jargon going on here. It's straight fast driving down the road.
Yeah, dude, you can tell it's like a freaking foot of snow on the highway and everything. And they didn't even clear off the windshields or anything.
No, at one point, like there was so much snow on the front of their car. I'm like, how are they able to see?
Yeah, like what the fuck? Clean off your car for God's sakes.
Cut back to the kids still walking through the snow, and then another adult leaves the van that's still alive. This is Dr. Brown.
And I mean, like, this is when I was like, what is this, a fucking clown car? Like, how many people were in here? How many people are popping out? And, one of the behind the scenes implied that maybe the driver was this guy. I don't think that's correct because he's wearing a completely different outfit than the driver's wearing. So for me, this is a separate character, this doctor character. I think it's we can all figure out he was overseeing the transportation of these kids, and you'll find out where they're from in a little bit. But I think the only 2 people that technically died were the nun and the driver in the front seat.
I agree. And I think it's just a fault of the screenwriter.
Yeah, and the director not giving us any coverage inside the van.
Right. Quick shot of the outside of the cocktail chalet in Lake Arrowhead. I know exactly where this is because I've been there. It's changed a lot in the obviously 40 years, 50 years since, but it's still like really nostalgic when you go up there. You feel like you're in the 70s a little bit, and I don't know if that chalet's still there, but it's pretty dope.
Dude, it's so cool on the insides. Again, it's so early 70s decor, and everything everybody's wearing is early 70s. Oh my god, I fucking love it. I love all their outfits. I love all the locations in this. It's just oozing early 70s.
Oozing. Papa Doc can be overheard saying, "There's going to be a list from here to Malibu for people begging to get in. The Retirement Village Health will be a goddamn resort." He's sitting with his wife, Lovely, along with Harvey and Ruth. And Papa Doc asks where Rick and Julie are, and they just happen to walk in. soon as they walk in, Papa Doc asks Rick if he's ready to get to work. Rick goes like, sure, but he kind of rolls his eyes, and Papa Doc, he says, I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't kept pushing. Isn't that right? Harvey goes, right. Harvey's like a total ass kisser, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He will be
for
throughout
sure.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
Papa Doc
spineless, totally spineless and everything. And Papa Doc is all spine. He's all man.
Right. Oh, man. He talks about when he was 14, mopping down Coppin Heaven's cruddy walls and halls. And while he's saying this whole jargon about when he was young and having to work hard, Lovely is like mimicking him the whole time.
Like, because she's heard it like a million fucking times.
Right. And Lovely is probably like 20 years younger than him. She's like the trophy wife.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like if like a billionaire guy today, was sitting in his like resort in Florida, and he had his like young wife there, and you like hated both of them, but you don't hate these two.
No, you don't. And you know what? I'll take a Papa Doc over Elon fucking Musk any fucking day of the week. Like, seriously, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like back in the day, Papa Doc was the guy who actually did do the work and claw his way up. And I get what obviously he's kind of a gas bag. And he's kind of like, yeah, we get it, dude. But at the same time, I do feel like he has a right to be proud because he probably did that. Whereas Elon Musk never did shit in his fucking life. He got all of his money from his fucking dad. He didn't fucking make SpaceX. He didn't fucking make Tesla. No. He fucking bought him from people. I hate people that fucking put Elon Musk up on a pedestal. The guy's a fucking piece of shit who's never done anything before in his fucking life. Like, he's never created anything. He's only ever bought into things. Whereas Papa Doc, I guarantee you, he fucking built shit with his own hands.
He sure did.
I'm a Papa Doc fan 100%, by the way.
I'm going to get you a Papa Doc t-shirt.
Dude, I want that fucking beard he's got.
Right. And so he's talking about how great, how he worked hard all his life. And while she's mimicking him, he tells her to butt up. And he says, if you don't like the noise, stay out of the plant.
I love it, man. I love it.
And she goes, I have too much invested, darling. Oh,
and when she points at her glamorous rings, basically.
Right. Harvey kisses his ass and asks, is there anything I can do to help? And Papa Doc says, I'll let you know, Harv. Papa says, I'm not a doctor. I got here by hard work and lots of it. But you'd think that a young doctor being considered to hit up a new complex wouldn't mind putting up a little extra time. He's talking about Rick.
Yeah.
Harvey stammers and basically says, I thought that job was meant for me. Papa Doc just ignores him, puts on his hat, and he tells everybody to basically get up and leave because they're going to go to the house.
And he tells Harvey to pay for it. Like, take care of the lunch and everything.
Take care of the check. Yeah, get the check. Yeah. Cut back to the kids tracking through the snow. And you also see this doctor trekking through the snow as well. Cut back to everyone leaving the restaurant and getting in Papa Doc's car. They're all in the big car because they had a chauffeur drive. Papa Doc had a chauffeur drive them up, the first group up to Lake Arrowhead originally.
Yeah.
Cut to the mansion of Papa Doc because it kind of looks like it from a distance. And you hear the horns honking and awaking Ralph. Ralph is sleeping in his guest quarters, I guess. But he's sleeping on the floor. His place is a mess. He looks like he's drunk, but he's not. Papa Doc continues because I can't say that. I'll get canceled. Papa Doc honks from the car. Ralph comes out to greet them. Ralph tells him to get the luggage and bring it in. Ruth gets out of the car and she's already drinking from her whiskey flask. Harvey and Ruth walk in the house and Ruth looks at Harvey and goes, well, Harv, you had your chance and you blew it.
She does not hold back whatsoever.
Harvey goes, well, I'll talk to him later. Ruth just dismisses him and takes a big swig off her flask and goes in, continues to go into the house.
Man, poor Harvey. I mean, I kind of feel bad for Harvey throughout this film.
Right. No, I do too. As Ralph gets the luggage from the car, you see the kids walking closer towards the mansion and the doctor following them as well with a big shiner on his head. Cut back to Rick with Lovely, and she's like kind of flirting with him.
Dude, she is horny this entire film. So horny that she's going to hit on Lenny from Mice and Men later.
Exactly, because she asks Rick to get her bags, but then you hear Julie call from outside the scene for Ralph to get her bags. And Julie kind of looks at Rick with that look. You know, she just gives him that look.
That
Just gives him
look.
that look.
You know that look.
Cut to Lovely in her bedroom with Ralph unpacking her bags. She's sitting down and watching him, and she asks if Ralph likes working for Papa Doc. Ralph says, I don't like when he yells at me. And then Lovely says, well, I don't yell at you, do I? Do you like me? And Ralph says, you're a nice lady. You're a nice lady. It's a little bit of a Rain Man thing going on.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I'm going to get myself in trouble.
Oh, boy.
Lovely asks Ralph to come brush her hair. Ralph says, you have hair like my rabbit. She starts to brush her hair like he's basically getting the mat out of a dog's hair.
Oh, my
So
God.
it's not very sexy. It's not
No.
sexy, Ralph. It's not.
Not sexy, Ralph, at
Then
all.
she tells Ralph to rub her feet. He starts rubbing her feet, but she's still got her shoes on, her snow galoshes or whatever. And she goes, take my shoes off, Ralph. And he starts like basically squeezing her feet. And she goes, Ralph, you're very strong. And then she gets up and she goes, Ralph,
Have you ever
pick me
killed
up.
a mouse before in your pocket?
Yeah. Oh, God. She says, Ralph, pick me up. And he says, well, I don't want to hurt you. And then he picks her up and he like picks her up, but practically squeezes her.
I thought he was going to smash her head into the ceiling.
That's what I thought too. She tells him to put her down on the bed and he throws her on the bed. He starts to walk off and then she brings him over and he lays on the bed face down.
She laughs. She's like, haven't you ever laid with a woman before?
Ralph says, I had a mother and two sisters, but they got squished in a bus.
That was so dark. I picked up on that the second time I watched this, and I was like, that's a dark piece of dialogue.
Oh, this is one of the funniest scenes in the movie, by the way.
Oh, yes, it is. It absolutely is.
Lovely
It's also one of
says-
the darkest when you think about it.
Yep. Lovely asks if he's ever wanted to make love to a woman or touch a woman. And he kind of thinks about it for a second, and he doesn't really say anything. And she tells him to stand up. Then she tells him to take his shirt off, and he does. And he's got like a what do you call it? Long underwear underneath.
Yeah, long johns, yeah.
And God, this is really uncomfortable. Then she tells him to take his pants off. He pulls his pants down. He's standing there.
In his long johns.
So look, guys and gals and gang, he's clearly special needs, and she's taking advantage of him, and it's really uncomfortable.
It really is.
And I'm kind of going to stop right there because she starts laughing at him, and suddenly the door opens, and it's Julie. She asks what's going on. Lovey says nothing. Ralph just is helping me unpack. Julie tells Ralph to put his pants on and go downstairs. He does. He walks off, and Julie confronts Lovey and asks him what the hell's going on.
And Julie, by the way, is in like a tiny, tiny little nightie.
Yeah, it's like, 3 p.m. They're already dressed for bed.
I know.
Lovely's wearing a bathrobe, by the way.
Julie
says-
cafe.
Julie says, I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do or who you do it with, but you do it on your time. Lovely says, there's very little difference between me and you. I do my thing and you do yours. Julie says, I love Rick and we're probably going to be married. And Lovely says, that's nice. You balled him and you still want to marry him? And Julie says, what do you mean? Lovely says, I had him before you did, and I can have him anytime I want. Julie calls her a bitch, and they start wrestling. Cat fight! Cat fight! Cat fight!
Zach, do you remember the Seinfeld episode where they got so excited about the cat fight? That's all I can think about it. It's just Kramer going, cat fight!
I think so, but I also remember ECW at the time, the commentator who was so great, he would scream when the women would start wrestling, he'd start going, cat fight! Cat fight!
And this has everything that you want from a cat fight.
Yep. I won't describe it as detailed as maybe Corey will, but it's got everything you want, like you said. And then Ruth walks in with a brush and smiles and starts watching. She asks what they're doing. She goes, what are you, auditioning for the Olympics?
And I love it. She's saying this in Lovely's titties are just hanging out,
Yeah, exactly. And Julie says, oh, we're just having a little fun. And Ruth says, whatever turns you on, honey. Turns around and walks out.
I love how Ruth just popped in and just dropped some commentary and then just rolled out.
Part of me at first was like, oh gosh. When I first saw this movie, I'm like, where are we going with this? Is this going to turn into a bow chicka wow wow moment?
Is this one of Corey's movies?
Not quite. Cut to Ralph playing with his rabbits. Like, what is it, in the garage or something? Or like a little, like...
Yeah, like a shed type of thing. 'Cause it's later, it's where the
basement.
generator's going to be and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, it's, I think of a shed as being something tiny, but I think technically it's like a machine shop / shed area type of thing.
Garage. Basement, like, area. And he's talking to the rabbits like they're his friends, and he goes... People are scary. They're not like us. They play scary games. Take off your clothes. Sit down on my bed. He laughs and he's like recreating what happened. And then Ralph says, I think Julie's mad at me.
Zach, we've seen a lot of simple jacks, to quote Tropic Thunder in movies. And you know what? Ralph, I think, is one of the better depicted ones, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there's some psychiatrists out there that would probably disagree with me, but like, he isn't depicted as being like too stupid, but he's just kind of, I don't know. But anyways, he's no simple Jack. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Cut back to the kids in the woods.
This movie in general is just going to have us canceled.
Yeah, it is. Cut back to the kids we're just getting started too. Cut back to the kids in the woods. Brian sees the house ahead. Kids are getting tired. Brian wants them to continue on. One of the girls asks if he is still alive, and Brian says, leave it to me. He'll never get us again. I think they're referring to Dr. Brown. Back to Ralph taking care of his rabbits. Says he'll come back and check on him. He has to take care of those people. Cut to the priest running through the woods in the snow saying, I have to get them. I have to catch them. Not priest. I thought he was a priest for the longest time.
Well, I'm actually glad you mentioned that. I was gonna correct you, but he does give you priest vibes because he's wearing all black and his jacket is kind of all black and his collar is sort of up. And just film language. We always think of doctors having a white coat or something like that. And, coupling it with the fact that there was a nun in the car and, Gail Smale is pretending to be a nun. I am 100% with you. I kind of thought he was a priest as well, but you'll see his name tag later and he's an MD.
Right. This scene kind of repeats itself because you cut back to Ralph with the rabbits saying, I got to make them sandwiches. That's easy. And he starts talking about all the things that he's got to do, how he's making a beer can chicken for Papa Doc, but it was too many spices, blah, blah, blah. And then you cut back to the doctor who now finds He finds a blanket of the kids because they dropped it along the way. And he continues with his, I've got to stop them. He calls out for Brian, actually. He says, I have to stop them. Cut back to the kids who are now inside the house, but they're in like the garage or the basement or whatever.
Yeah, you want to say basement, but this is the scene that was filmed in LA, and so like it's not actually there on, at that location. So I don't really know what it's supposed to be, but I'm thinking it's supposed to be the basement, the back area,
lower level of the home.
We had this problem on Christmas Bloody Christmas on trying to figure out Tori's house as well. Zach and I clearly do not have like a background in architecture.
Sorry, we don't live.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, guys. We don't have homes with multiple levels.
Exactly. We both live in apartments. I do. Yeah, I know you do, you fucker. You're by the beach as well. But still, it's not.
What level are you on? I'm on the third level.
You piece of shit. I'm on a first floor, 2-bedroom apartment. Go fuck yourself.
So what happens when you make podcasts, guys? You hit the jackpot.
But no, this whole scene, this 5-minute slow-mo scene was filmed, I think on a set or just in LA or something. And this is where my first confusion was because Leif Garrett has a wig on, and I'm not sure why, at this point, so I think he's another kid. Gail Smale is not playing Hannah in this scene, so they have just a random girl with, like, sunglasses on, and not a nun's habit, but sort of a sheet wrapped to look like a nun's habit, because back in 1973, no one was thinking that you were going to have a 4K, disc of this so you could rewatch it, type of thing. So I think they just assumed, like, oh, no one will notice. We all noticed. Everyone noticed that was not Gail Smale in it.
Well, this is an interesting scene because on what you just described, but the kids have made it to the house. They're talking about, if if the adults there are going to hear them. And Brian says, negative, this house is too well built for them to hear that, basically. One of them, Sister Hannah's playing with a pitchfork. And then the doctor comes into the room. They're hiding. He walks into the room and doesn't see them. And it's a slow motion shot of the pitchfork coming up and hitting the doctor. Suddenly the priest falls to the ground.
You called him a priest again.
Sorry. God. Sorry.
He's coded. He looks like a fucking priest. He really does.
Yeah. The priest of doctorism is now this is the beginning of 5 minutes of pummeling in slow motion, pummeling of this doctor.
They rain blows down upon him.
So David, like you said, he had a wig on. He pulls it off his head. He now has short hair. One of the kids has a hammer hitting him. David has a big stick. They're hitting him over and over again. The scene ends. I just took 5 minutes and I wrapped it up in 30 seconds.
That's why you picked this movie to break down. I know it.
Oh, totally. It's one of the reasons. The scene ends with Brian, who now has that famous Swiss Army knife that he found in the van earlier, stabbing the priest, stabbing the doctor. God, I'm almost done with the doctor's dead. So I don't
At least
he's
gone. Yeah. We don't have to worry about this anymore.
Stabs the doctor in the chest with the knife. David asks if he's dead. Mo says she's tired and she's hungry. Brian says, we got to get rid of the body first. Scene fades to black.
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim.
And I'm Dean.
And we're the hosts of Talking Back. We're a retro-based podcast covering movies, comics, video games, and more.
Check us out every Monday where we hit the rewind button and dig into some of our favorite content from the past. We like to keep things fun, lighthearted, and informative.
Do you feel like you need more nostalgia in your life? Then check out Talking Back. We're available everywhere podcasts are found.
And now, back to the show.
Cut to Julie getting ready for bed, and Rick walks in on her with a bottle of champagne.
Hey,
Ooh,
Rick.
hey.
I'm 32-year-old Rick, but I look 42. And, by the way, Julie is 2 years older than him, so she's 34, but I think she's supposed to be younger, if not maybe the same age, I guess.
She looks older.
She does. I know. I didn't want to say it, but she does. And she's
Sorry.
kind of got like a lollipop head going on. Like her body's all skinny.
Oh,
and she's got this big old head. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Julie in this. I actually like Lovely so much better. Like it's for like acting and everything goes,
I figured. Well, she's dead now, so you can't do anything.
They're all dead.
Suddenly,
except for the kids are dead.
People are like, I want to hear what Zach does on his podcast. Oh my God.
Don't listen to this episode.
Yeah, don't listen to this one. I should have put a disclaimer first. So Rick says to Julie, he's like, your father's a huge pain in the ass. And Julie's like, why do you keep picking on him? Rick says, because all he does is ever talk about how much he paid for this house, his mansion. And Julie says, you should hear him out once in a while. Just talk to him, and we'll have the rest of the weekend to ourselves. Rick says, I'll talk to him tomorrow. And then Julie says, why do we go away sledding? Why do we go away tomorrow and go sledding? And Rick says, no, everybody will follow us if we do that. And Julie says, not Lovely. She's the indoor type. And Rick says, my baby's jealous, isn't she? And then suddenly the music gets kind of, sweet. And then Julie asks Rick if he ever laid her. And Rick says,
love that old phrase. I was like, because I had actually rewound it. I was like, did she just say laid her?
Yes. And then he doesn't give her an answer. And she goes, have you ever slept with her? Have you ever slept with her? Rick says, of course I have. Same as everyone. She kicks him in the butt. They start to play around the bedroom. He wrestles her to the bed and they make love.
It's all you got to do, buddy. Of course, as in everyone else, like it's just make it sort of funny, I'm a guy, it's okay.
Exactly. Cut to the party people, Ruth and Harvey. Ruth's getting drunk. Harvey says it wasn't the right time or the right place to talk to Papa Doc in the restaurant. Ruth wants action from Harvey. She says, what do you think we came up here for? Pleasure? What are you afraid of? Harvey says, I tried. And Ruth says, well, in tennis, there's a term called following through.
No.
Harvey says,
Jesus.
which I tend to do, but I wish you wouldn't push me. They start arguing. Ruth says, just drop it. Harvey tells her to go easy on the booze. Cut back to the doctor. And we know he's a doctor now because he's dead in the ice. And you see his name tag and the camera zooms in on his name tag. P. Brown, MD, State Mental Hospital, Children's Acute Ward.
Yeah, so now we know that the kids, could have guessed it to begin with because they just killed him. But now we know that they're from a psychiatric ward.
Right. And that's when one of the kids asks if George is dead. And they say he's got to be dead. And then that's when I realized, well, George is probably the driver of the van.
Okay, thank you, because multiple notes I have throughout this is like, who the fuck is George? And, because later on, Brian would be like, oh, you're scared of George. And David's like, I'm not scared of George, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, every time I watch this movie, I was like, who the fuck is George? I'm like looking around,
So there's a moment after this happens, and I was thinking about it, and I was reminded again now when you just said this about the kids being in a hospital and like being afraid of George. There's a documentary on HBO. It's called The Synanon Fix, and it was about a cult in Santa Monica in the 1950s that was started by a guy with well intentions, as most of these cults are, to get people off of drugs. And one of the hotels here on the beach, which is now a prominent hotel, was like the beginning of this cult where this guy, it was like a halfway house basically. And he was getting people off drugs with his own methods, but he became big and popular and it became a larger, entity. And they eventually moved up to Oakland, and they started getting investigated because they were like, he was having everyone shave their heads to show their, show that they were believed in him or whatever. Yeah. He was having the men get vasectomies, and he was having the women get abortions if they were pregnant after this certain time. Yeah. And so they were losing money because it was getting sketchy there, and they turned it into basically like a rehabilitation center for troubled kids. So the kids of the people there were now being put in these schools, and they were being beaten and tortured by the staff that worked there. And the kids were like escaping, runaways, trying to get away from this. And then one local person found one of the kids one night trying to escape. And it's a crazy documentary. I highly recommend everyone check it out. But it made me think of this with these kids. So if you see these random kids, you think, oh my God, what happened to you poor kids? This is the opposite. These kids clearly are troubled.
Yeah, these kids are actually troubled. The converse side of that, I think 9 times out of 10, the kids that are committed are probably not troubled. But here we're supposed to basically buy into the fact that I do think that these kids would kill you just as they would to look at you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's where they come from. But that is interesting, though. I actually might add that one. Did you say that was on Netflix or Max?
It's on HBO Max.
Okay.
The Synanon Fix, I think, is what it is.
Okay.
It's really fascinating. The fact that it happened here in Santa Monica is crazy to me. But yeah, it's
okay.
worth
I'll
checking
see if
out.
Myra wants to watch that one. I know she likes her cult stuff. So.
Oh, it's good stuff. I highly recommend it. Cut back to Harvey and Ruth. And Harvey's like massaging Ruth's head, but then he starts massaging her neck. She's really not into it. And clearly I can see why, because he's not good at massaging her. He asks if she's feeling any better. And because you could tell like he kind of wants to get it on with her.
Of course. He hasn't had it in a while, he says.
He starts to make out with her, but he's like practically choking her.
Yeah, not the best technique right there.
Yeah. Suddenly she like goes, well, let me get a refill and I'll be right back with her alcohol. Harvey looks bummed out by Ruth, who clearly doesn't want to be with him.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because like I said, I don't dislike Harvey, but at the same time, I can see why she's not sexually attracted to him because he's kind of weak a little bit, but I don't think he's a bad guy.
He's not a bad guy. But someone is a bad kid because there's a scene that's put in the middle of that whole thing where a phone line is cut with an axe. So now the phone lines are dead in their home. Cut to Ruth, who's now in the bar with a bunch of rifles behind her. That's important, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
She's pouring herself a glass of J&B, takes a swig, and looks over and sees all the kids in the room. Just staring at her.
She screams for Harvey. She goes running up, and Harvey comes out, and she's like, the little people. And I'm like, they're kids. They're not little people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know the difference. You're an adult.
And what does Papa Doc say? Because they all come out and he goes, she's got the goddamn DTs.
She's got the fucking DTs, the delirium tremors or whatever, which basically that does actually cause you to hallucinate. Because I hate in movies where, people, or yeah, it happens in real life too. Like people think that like just because you smoke weed or something, you see the UFO, you see the Sasquatch. No, like I've been blitzed high and blitzed drunk that I've never actually hallucinated anything. I've been on mushrooms and I don't fucking hallucinate anything. But I do think that the DTs apparently can make you hallucinate if they're really bad, though. But you got to be a mega alcoholic to have the DTs. Like my dad, I consider he was a functioning alcoholic. I don't think he ever had like the DTs. Like I think you have to be the type of person like her, Ruth clearly is, where you're drinking the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep.
If you were married to a guy who looked like that, then would kind of make sense.
Oh, come on, Boss Hog. He's not Boss Hog yet. He's not there yet.
He's not boss yet. He's not boss yet.
He's not a boss yet.
He's not a boss.
Good. You know what's funny? I was going a different direction, and you actually put it in the right direction.
I try to. I tend to put things in the right direction.
You do.
So after that, cut to Papa Doc talking to the kids. They're all in the bar, and he's interrogating them, and he's skeptical about this wreck that they said they were in. Sister Hannah says, "We walked all night," and Brian starts spouting mumbo jumbo about, according to his watch, they've been walking all night. Like he tells them like, oh, at 0700 hours to like, military time or whatever.
Yeah, it's all military talk to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's looking at them very skeptically, except for Rick, who tells them to get on the couch and get warm. Brian's got a cool like toy machine gun in his hand. Hannah tells the group that everyone else is dead except for them. And they didn't break into the home. The door was unlocked. And then Mo says, "I'm not feeling good." Papa Doc tells her to take it. He's like, "Hey, now take it easy now."
He doesn't want her to barf on his furniture and stuff.
Right. He calls Lovely over to take her into the bedroom to get her, cleaned up.
Go take care of your daughter, your actual real daughter. Go take care of her.
Right. Rick orders the rest of the kids to go up there as well.
And I like how she's like sort of Lovely's leading them up the stairs, but she stops at Harvey because she's like, "Doctor, you want to like help out,
Right.
And so he kind of goes with them. I will say like Mo being sick is another sort of thread they kind of drop. So I don't know if she's faking it right now, or if she really is sick, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Kind of like when David puts on the dress thing, doesn't really go anywhere.
No, but that's funny though.
It's something.
It's really
it's
weird.
Something.
It's something. So everyone kind of goes upstairs to get ready except for Brian, and Brian looks at Papa Doc and goes, "Are you the CO?" Brian checks his watch and he says, "Chow in 30 minutes."
Oh, because he's hungry, and then Papa Doc said he can get Ralph to basically whip him up some cornflakes.
Cornflakes.
I like how Brian's like, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Basically give him an order,
Right. He walks upstairs, and then Papa Doc says to Rick, he goes, "What's up with the machine gun?" And Rick says, "Didn't you play soldier when you were a boy?" Doc says, "No, I didn't have time."
And I like how Rick goes, "Bullshit, you're still playing it," and then kind of gives him like this mock salute type of thing.
Right.
But Papa Doc, like, he doesn't get angry. He kind of like smirks a little bit, and they have I like the relationship of Rick and Papa Doc. They kind of have this antagonistic, but yet I do think that maybe Rick's not caring is what kind of makes Papa Doc, kind of like be like, okay, you get a pass. It's sort of his laissez-faire attitude. But there's going to be some other interactions later with Rick and Papa Doc that I really enjoy their relationship.
Yeah, I think if this movie was more fully developed, dare I say a remake,
I was talking to our pal Donna the Dead, Donna, online, and about this movie, and she said that she's not big on remakes, kind of like us too, but this one might be one that would benefit from a remake only because there's just so many little wonky things here and there that really, after a while, I mean, it also makes the movie interesting and gives it a bit of a charm, but some of the wonkiness can bog this film down a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Papa Doc, after everyone goes upstairs, Papa Doc goes to make a phone call, realizes phone lines are dead, and he calls to Ralph to fix the phone lines. Cut to Brian and Susan on a bed, and David walks in, and Susan's playing with a lighter, and Brian's jumping on the bed. And then Brian and David start kind of back and forth talking to each other, messing with each other. David again asks if there's any sign of George. And Susan says no. And Brian calls David a chicken, starts mocking him. David asks what's wrong with Mo. Susan says she's sick, and they all start to pretend to throw up.
I love this scene because it feels like kids. They feel like kids. They don't feel like they're sinister monsters and everything. Like, oh, behind closed doors, they're working on their plan of how they're going to get everybody. No, they act like kids and they talk like kids, and I like it.
Yeah, this is kind of like it's normal up to this point. Up to this point, everything's
other than the fact that they killed Priest Doctor,
sorry,
it's pretty
Priest
normal.
Doctor. Yeah, Judas Priest Doctor. Other than that, everything's fine. Cut to the next day, and Rick and Julie go tubing. And it's a funny tubing scene because they both bail hard in the snow.
Yeah.
We all know it's fun when you bail hard in the snow. It's not fun anymore.
No, not now. But back when we were 32, Zach, many, many moons ago when we were 32, bailing in the snow could be fine.
Yeah, now you break a hip.
Yeah, because we're old.
It's so weird, yeah. Cut to Harvey working out in the gym, telling Papa Doc what he could do to himself. He's like talking to himself. Ruth walks in, eating a banana, watching him. He's acting all aggressive, and she kind of likes it. He looks at her and says, "You out of booze?" She just glares at him. He goes back to working out.
Yeah, he could have she was actually getting into him for a second. I was like, no, Harvey, you blew it. You could have had her right there.
And he's literally working out with no weights. Like, if you look at the cable, there's no weights on those.
Well, bro, clearly Sorrell Booke has never worked out a day in his life. But as someone who does work out, Zach, not me, but as someone who does work out, I know that you were rolling over in your grave at his form. He was absolutely horrible.
So bad. I'm like, guy, at least roll your shoulders back.
Dude, he was so jerky. He's going to throw his fucking neck out or something.
Yeah, I go to the gym now and I see people do that to this day where they're they pump 5 pounds. Or a guy who's in there, the gym is quiet because everyone's got their earbuds on, but he's got his, video with the volume all the way up, like basically sitting on his lap so everyone can hear what he's listening to. And he's wearing jeans.
Yeah,
in the gym.
Oh, the gym jeans, baby. God, back in the day when I used to go to the gym, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, fucking seeing the kids in there with their sunglasses on their head and they're like their jeans and a button-down shirt. I'm like, are you even working out? What are you doing? As I get older, I realize that it's a place for people to pick people up. I always just viewed the gym as a place where you go work out in your shitty gym clothes and you fucking leave afterwards. I've never picked anybody up at the gym.
That's what I do. But then I remember magazines like Maxim would come out and they're like, rate this guy's gym outfit. Oh my God. And they have women, quote unquote, women writing into the Maxim rating the way men were dressed at the gym and how you should look cool at the gym and what you should wear at the gym to look cool.
I miss and don't miss those days.
I agree. Mostly don't miss.
Yeah.
Cut to Harvey now in his bedroom getting dressed, and David walks in watching him, startling Harvey.
Oh, by the way, Harvey's getting his 3-piece suit on, a suit where you have a vest and everything. And I'm like, you got to admit, Rick's got it right. He's like, I'm on vacation up here. Harvey, though, he's up there to make an impression and get a job.
He is. And Harvey asks his name, and David says his name, and Harvey goes, "Oh, David." And David says, "You're being redundant." And Harvey says, "Redundant's a big word for such a little guy." And David says, don't refer to me as a little guy. I'm a 12-year-old male. And then David says, my friends and I were in an accident. We're the only survivors. Harvey starts to talk about his mother and father, and David continues, it was quite frightening, crashing in the middle of nowhere. Because of my ingenuity, we survived. We were on our way to Hollywood when it happened. And Harvey goes, oh, so you're an actor. And David goes, among other things. The group and I were going to make a movie. And there's a dress on the bed. I guess it's Ruth's?
I think it's
mark?
Ruth's, yeah.
He goes, David looks at it and starts touching it, like stroking it. And then suddenly David says, green is a lovely color. You think it goes with my eyes? And Harvey goes, well, I guess so. And David says, it's nice
Harvey's
material.
as confused as we are right now. Like his this is what I love about this scene, because this doesn't really, it's so weird. It comes out of nowhere with this whole thing with David, but the fact that Harvey is our reaction as well. He's like, sure, I guess.
This is when I kind of like Harvey, because this scene and the chess scene, I'm like, this is pretty freaking funny. Yeah. So David says, nice material, poor styling. He stands up and he goes, I gotta go now, Mr. Beckman. He snaps his fingers and Harvey says,
no, he goes, I gotta go now, Mr.
Oh, yeah.
And I like how he snaps his fingers. I think it's a little bit rude, but I get what he's trying to do.
Totally rude.
Yeah, and Harvey's like, Beckman. You know, he's like, Mr. Beckman. But he's like, it's one of those things where like David is acting, or he's acting what a 12-year-old thinks is supposed to be acting as an adult, basically.
Right. And he goes, we will be friends, Harvey Beckman. And Harvey says, sure, by all means.
Sure, why not?
Cut to Susan lighting candles with her lighter while Julie looks on. And Julie asks how she's doing. She says, good. Susan doesn't say a whole lot through this movie.
No, that's fine. She's probably my least favorite of the kids.
And Julie says, we're going to get you back to your parents as soon as possible. And Susan doesn't say anything. Ralph walks in with Mo on his back, giving her a piggyback ride. He says tables are set for dinner, Papa Doc. Papa Doc says, when you're done playing horsey, we can eat. David walks up to Papa Doc and says, your vehicle is in excellent condition. Papa Doc says, you leave that car alone. And David says, I happen to know a lot about cars. And Papa Doc says, I know all about them. You leave it alone. It cuts to everyone eating dinner. The kids are at their own table, and Rick's talking to Harvey about having his own practice, and Harvey's nervous about it. And Sister Hannah's also sitting at the adults' table, too.
And I like how, I don't think he tracked it really, but the conversation that Rick and Harvey were having, like I like that, like, Rick isn't, like, against Harvey. He actually compliments Harvey. He's like, no, someone as smart as you, like, you should be running a practice or something. I feel like he's almost advocating for the job that he doesn't want. He's advocating Harvey to get sort of the job that he doesn't even sort of want himself. And I like that Harvey and Rick are not, like, adversaries in this movie.
Yeah, so to give you, like, a little more clarity for everyone wondering, basically Papa Doc has this new hospital that he's going to be opening, and he's going to give the job to Rick. He wants Rick to take the job because Rick is, not engaged, but probably will be eventually engaged to Julie. But Harvey really wants the job as well. And why Harvey's up there as such a kiss ass, there's no real context for it, but Harvey's jealous, but he doesn't treat Rick like an adversary. He just treats him like another guy that's up there.
And Rick doesn't treat Harvey like an adversary, which is, even though they were kind of shitting on him, or more so shitting on his wife on the drive up and everything, but I don't think he dislikes Harvey by any means.
No. But Sister Hannah's also sitting at that dinner table, and she looks at Rick and says, I was noticing your hair. It's very healthy.
Of all the lines, like, maybe that was in the script, but like, now that you see Rick, the actor, we can take that line out of the script.
No, I think you leave it in because you're like, are you kidding me? Because they call it back later on in the movie where it's like, that was really weird that she would say something like that,
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense. It kind of like hints at this oddness to them.
Yeah.
But then that's when Lovely asks Hannah if she wants to say grace, and they say grace. Brian salutes while everyone prays. Lovely says to Hannah, she goes, aren't you awfully young to be a nun? And Hannah says, I'm a novice. And David says, that's a beginner. And they all start to giggle and laugh. And Hannah says, they all get a little cheeky when they're away from school, but the Monsignor at the new school is going to be a lot tougher. Harvey says to David, What's the name of that picture you said you're going to be in? And Susan says, oh, he tells the biggest stories. And David says, future writers are always testing their ideas, Harvey Beckman. And he says, no offense. And Harvey goes, oh, not at all. You got to get your experience somewhere. Papa Doc says, if this weather holds up, you'll be on your way tomorrow. Suddenly all the kids look very nervous. Hannah says, you have a very nice house here. Papa Doc says, it ought to be. Costs plenty. Papa Doc notices Rick and Julie whispering in each other's ears, and he asks what they're talking about. Rick says, a little ski trip. Anybody else want to come? Papa Doc says, we got work to do. Rick says, you've got work to do. We're going skiing. Papa says, you go skiing and that's it. Rick says, that's what? Papa says, you guessed it. Rick looks over at Harvey. Harvey nods. And then Rick looks at Papa Doc and says, fire me. How much you got in the bank?
I like how Rick kind of looks over at the kids and he goes, hey, you see those guns over there? Getting them to look at the guns. And then he mouths, kiss my ass at Papa Doc.
I love that.
And Papa Doc laughs. He's like, that's what I figured, you know? And then Rick sort of laughs too. And that's why I like this back and forth. Like, you think it's gruff and everything, but there's this underlying current that I think they both like each other. I think Rick ultimately knows, I don't want to work for Papa Doc, but I understand Papa Doc and I get along with him as my father-in-law, but I don't think I want to work with him.
Right.
And then on the other hand, Papa Doc's like, this guy's going to marry my daughter. I want him to work for me. He's kind of fighting back on me, and I kind of like that. I feel like Papa Doc kind of respects Rick for always pushing back on it.
He kind of does, but then he digs back at him and he's like, without your job at Copperhaven, you'd starve. So he's like, basically, I own you.
Yeah, it is, but they both kind of chuckle at it. So I felt like it was, again, it's just, there's boundaries there and everything, but at the same time, I do think that there's a general like between the two characters.
Speaking of general like between two characters, at least you think they are, Ralph's doing dishes and Sister Hannah walks in and asks if she can help. She wants to dry the dishes. Ralph says, I never done dishes before with a nun. Hannah says, well, we're just like everyone else. And Ralph says, no, you're special. Ralph says, if any bears bother you, you tell me and I'll fix them. Hannah asks if they've ever had any prowlers because he says bears are prowlers. Ralph says, sometimes in the summer, hardly ever in the winter. We're too far from the roads. Cut to David and Brian in that shed area, and they're messing with the generator.
Yeah.
Pulling the spark plugs out.
And that one little generator fucking runs the whole house, sort of, because even when it goes out later, the lights are still on. So sometimes I'm like, are there multiple generators? But no, technically, as far as the story goes, there's just that one generator. And kind of like in Happy Hell Night, you know, with Bear's generator down in the basement, I was like, Bear's nipple on his ear. But like, how does that one generator run that whole fucking house?
Good question.
You're hung up on Bear's nipple on his ear.
I am.
That was Crystal. Crystal called that one out to me. She was like, that wasn't a mole. That was a nipple.
It was a nipple. Cut back to Hannah and Ralph. And Hannah's asking Ralph if he's here all by himself. And Ralph basically says, yeah, he lives here year round by himself.
Because, you know, his mom and his sisters were squished in a bus.
Right. Ralph says, I don't mind. Nobody talks to me. And Hannah just looks at him. Cut back to Brian and David. And now David's wearing a wig, by the way, and Moe's there too. And they're hooking something up to the generator, some sort of cord. And then David out of nowhere says, I'm going to bust you right in the face when this job is done. Like, damn, dude, okay.
It's a little bastard.
Cut back to Ralph and Hannah. Ralph says, I'm funny in the head. I make people nervous. And then he says, I like talking to you. Maybe you're funny in the head too. Hannah just glares at him.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Hannah, like, shoots him a real mean look right away. I thought that was kind of going to go somewhere, but it kind of doesn't. She kind of cools out a little bit.
She does. And then he whispers to her and he says, you know, if you ever want to come visit when Papa Doc's not here, we don't have to let him know. It'll be our little secret. That's when he says, I never washed dishes with a nun before. I never had a secret. Brian walks in and asks how KP's going. Hannah's almost done. Brian says to Ralph, you ever been airborne? And he says no. Brian says, too bad. You look like you make a good paratrooper. A little fat, maybe. And then he says to Hannah, don't you think you make a good paratrooper, sister? And then suddenly Hannah screams and then slams a plate on the ground out of nowhere, scaring the crap out of everybody.
Yeah, I didn't get this at all.
Well, she's got issues, you know.
She's got the DTs.
she's an underage kid, but the director of the movie make me want to scream too.
Probably.
At that point, when everyone walks in, Hannah's shaking. She says something frightened me. That's when the whole group says, you know, of course you'd be frightened. Look what you've been through today. Today, even though they went sledding, tubing the day before.
Yeah, the timeline is kind of all over the place, you know. And I do like how, you know, like Papa Doc comes in, he's like, thinks Ralph did it, but everyone vouched for him that Ralph didn't do it, which is, it's interesting because they kind of protect Ralph a little bit here, the kids, but yet he's going to be the first one that gets it, though.
Yeah.
But it's technically not by their hands, technically, so... Right. I guess it could have been the trap is for anybody. It just happened to be that Ralph is the one that's going to sort of essentially step in it.
Right. There's part of me that feels like he would have lived longer if he hadn't have been told to go work on the generator.
And it's also the only kill that they actually don't do by hand. So I think that kind of, it's fitting that it's Ralph, because maybe in the script form, they're like, we got to kill Ralph, but he's getting along so well with the kids. I don't know how to do that. So it's going to just have to be a trap scenario where the kids they don't really know it's going to be him that's going to die. Not that they are going to technically care, but it makes more sense this way than later if they actually killed him by hand. Because then these scenes will make a little bit more sense now than they would have in another scenario.
Right. So Ruth and Lovely take everybody out of the room, out of the kitchen, basically get them ready for bed and comfort Hannah as well. Papa Doc just looks on concerned, and then he talks about that it's getting cold in their house, and he tells Ralph to go check the generator. Papa Doc goes to check the phone lines again, and they're still not working. Cut to Ralph outside the house, walking to the generator room, where I think where the rabbits are too.
Yeah, the whole mechanic room, the shed, it's all the same area.
When he goes to check it, he notices that one of the spark plugs is loose, and he plugs it in. At that same moment, like a noose gets wrapped around his neck.
So it's hanging over where you would be bent over looking. So it's already there, and it's like sort of a big enough loop that I think you were not supposed to notice it, you know?
Yeah.
But it is hanging there, and if you're bending over looking at the generator, the moment you start the generator, which is him putting like the fuse back on or whatever, I think the rope, the little wire, it's not even a rope, it's like a wire.
It's a wire.
It's attached to the cord, so when the thing starts up, the wire just shoots around his neck. Like it's a very sort of fast thing. I think it's a very, like, it looks like it would actually work in the real world. Like it's something that would actually work. The only way it works is if the person being trapped doesn't notice it there to begin with. And also, you have to be coming at the generator from a certain like angle, but you know, it's a movie. It's fine. No big deal. Cause it's actually pretty cool how fast it is. Like how fast the wire kind of shoots up around his neck and just hoists him up.
Yeah, because he plugs the spark plug back in, and as soon as it does, the generator starts up, and it wraps around his neck, and it pulls him off and lifts him off the ground, killing him dead instantly.
Like pretty fast. Like and it's kind of, you know, morbid. Like his feet are kicking out a little bit, and they're kind of going stiff and everything, you know?
Yeah. Cut to Rick and Julie playing pool.
Bro, the red walls in the pool hall, like they match like his red pants that he's wearing, and like she's wearing some red, and he's got some red in his shirt, and I'm like, oh boy, the 70s, they love their reds and their mustards and their browns.
They sure do. She doesn't want to play pool. She wants to talk to him.
She wants to play pocket pool.
Yeah, he goes, I got a better idea. How about we get some of that $100 wine your dad keeps bragging about?
So 1974, a $100 bottle of wine in 2024 is $677. So that tells you what kind of wine that is.
Yeah, it's some good stuff.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. But I always find it funny, like with shit like this, like, because we hear this line now, we're like, a $100 bottle of wine, that's not the biggest deal, but 1974, think about it in 1974 money, you know?
I mean, don't buy wine that's $100, guys. It's not worth it.
Don't buy wine that's $677.
That too. I remember being I was invited to a really posh hotel in Santa Barbara by a former parent of mine, and for dinner with her and her daughter. And we were at dinner, and I looked at she doesn't drink, but she goes, but you should get a drink. And I'm like, okay. So I look at the cocktail list, and there's a cocktail on there that's over $200. And I go, is this martini really $200? And she goes, well, you might as well order it to find out. I go, no, I can't. She goes, well, if you don't order it, I'm going to order it. And she did. And I drank it. And it tasted like crap.
It tastes like shit.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. My God, bro.
Monticello? Was that where? Yeah. Anyways, that's a crazy story. If you want to hear more weird stories like that, sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/podcasting after dark, for our wrap up after dark, where Corey goes a little more in depth on some of my backstories or things I bring up on the show. And he's like, let's talk more about that on Wrap Up After Dark. So go to patreon.com/wrap up after dark. We've also got the Carpenter Factor on there, where we basically talked about every single one of John Carpenter's movies. We now have the Coscarelli Factor, where we talk about every single one of Don Coscarelli's movies. We've got all sorts of great stuff on our Patreon at patreon.com/podcasting after dark.
My man.
So back to Rick and Julie. Julie says, that $100 wine's in the cellar, and they go off to go check out the wine. Cut to Lovely and Papa Doc in the living room with Brian and Mo. Brian and Mo are playing a game. Harvey and David are playing chess.
And you think that David's winning at this point.
David's sitting at the chessboard watching Harvey play. Harvey's taking his time, and David says, whenever, Harvey Beckman. Harvey makes a move, and David instantly makes another move.
Dude, I hate it in real life, but I like it in movies when a character or somebody calls you by your full name. Like, I find
really funny.
It's interesting in a movie, but we've met those type of people in real life, and I fucking hate those kind of people.
Oh, I mean, David's an asshole.
Because it's like a power thing, right? It's a total power thing.
Yeah, it's. But Harvey's like intrigued by it. He's totally dismissive about it.
Yeah, no, he's actually pretty, good mannered about it.
Right. Cut to Rick and Julie in Papa Doc's cellar, and they're drinking this $100 bottle of wine, but behind them is a giant Budweiser, like a plastic bottle Budweiser ad. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So I always kind of, every time I watched that, I was taking it as like, this is like a lodge, like sort of a resort. But I think we're supposed to take it like what you've said multiple times, which is it's just his giant mansion up in Lake Arrowhead.
Right. Julie's asking Rick if she thinks there's anything strange about the kids, and Rick kind of dismisses her. And she goes, they don't act like normal kids. And Rick says, honey, kids these days are smoking pot at 10 and bombed out at 12.
They are. Apparently back in the 70s they were.
Yeah.
Man, what a time. What a time to be a kid.
What a time. And Julie says, there's definitely something wrong. Did you notice that Susan's obsessed with fire? And Hannah just sits there with those cold eyes. They go back to making out, but then Julie says, like, she kind of interrupts the making out. And she goes, and then that kid with that watch, that's an expensive man's watch. Where do you think he got it? And Rick goes, he probably stole it.
Which is true.
Racist. And Julie, but it's true. And Julie says, and the nun talking about your hair? And they both start laughing.
Hey, clearly I don't have healthy hair, so it's funny.
Right. They both laugh and they say, yeah, she doesn't talk like a nun. She goes, do you think there really was a crash? Maybe those kids are lying. And at the same time, Lovely starts coming down the cellar, like not sneaking up on them, but she overhears them and she starts coming close to them. Rick says, they don't seem too anxious about wanting to get home. And Lovely starts calling for them. They give her the bottle of wine. She sits down next to them and they give her the bottle of wine, but she looks like she's about to drink it, but she doesn't. And Julie says, we'd like to talk about the kids. It's so funny because these two, like 20 minutes ago, were catfighting, beating the crap out of each other. And now they're like buddies.
Yeah.
And Julie says, we think they're kind of weird. And Lovely gives the bottle back to them and says, you know the problem with you? You've been hanging out together too long. And she stands up and walks away and she dismisses them. David and Harvey continue to play chess. David's very cocky. It looks like he's about to beat Harvey. And then suddenly out of nowhere, Harvey says, check and mate.
Okay.
David's like observing the board, kind of figuring out what he should do next. And he just stands up angry. And Harvey says, nice try, David. You're a good boy. I might give you another crack at it if you're a good boy. And David knocks all the pieces off the chessboard and walks off. Harvey laughs and says, I'll set the board up. And David has his back to Harvey and says, good night, Harvey Beckman. And he walks off.
And Harvey's like, that's weird.
Yeah. Susan's sitting with Ruth at the table. And at this point, Ruth, who's still bombed out of her mind, drunk, she's asking Susan where her mother and father are. And Susan says, I don't have any. Brian's playing craps with Mo. And he checks his watch. And then you cut back to Susan sitting with Ruth. That's when Brian says, basically time to go to bed. Susan says, I'm staying with Mrs. Beckman tonight. Ruth looks like she's crying. So clearly in my mind, my world building is that Ruth wants a kid and this is her kid. She's like, I'm going to treat this kid like my kid, the kid I never had.
Right, of course.
Brian tells him when to wake up in the morning.
Well, yeah, because I like what he says. He's like revelry at like 0700 hours.
My dad used to say that to me.
And I was like, what is revelry? And I looked it up, and it's the bugle call that signals the start of the duty day and the raising of the national flag. So that's the revelry.
So my dad used to say, rebly, rebly. Rebly, rebly, wake my brother up at 6 a.m. in the summertime. 6 in the morning in summer. Yeah. Bang a trash can sometimes. Rebly, rebly, 0600. Basically wake us up. He'd go off to work all day. He'd tell my brother and I don't want you in the house because he think we just watch TV all day. So he basically kicked us out of the house, didn't give us a key to the house. And my brother and I were in a subdivision in the middle of Michigan. There's nothing, there are no corner stores, no malls, no nothing. We basically rode our bikes around this subdivision all day waiting for my dad to get home. Couldn't go in the pool, so lame.
That's... Buddy.
Summertimes in Michigan.
Wow. Woo. Yeah, I mean, I was out all day too in the summertimes, but it was like more like by choice. I could come back if I wanted to.
I couldn't go in the house. I could go in the garage. That was it.
Wow. You couldn't even so you're just peeing and pooping outside basically.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yep. I can see why you lived with your mom and your stepdad, Mike.
Which one? Yep.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
the Jewish one?
For a year.
Till they got it annulled. It's all right. Carol won't listen to this, but she will comment on my Facebook stories.
Exactly.
Does my mom comment on your stuff, or is it just your
never.
mom? Your mom comments on every single one of my Facebook stories. Every one of them.
That's the only way we communicate.
Jesus, God, help us. Help us all.
So Brian and Mo argue about the craps game, and they walk off. Mo walks over to a fish tank that's right by Papa Doc. She's tapping on the glass with like something hard. Basically, you're not supposed to tap on a glass.
Yeah,
that's what little shit does.
And those piranha are too big for that case. Like it's freaking, it's so small that
So there's piranha in one tank and there's goldfish in the other, but they're not piranha. They're piranhas.
Dude, so yeah, I wrote it down. Papa Doc calls them piranhas.
Piranhas. They're piranhas.
What is that? And I mean,
he says,
I think he's supposed to be saying piranha, but it's like how I say werewolf. He says piranha. And I was like, I rewound it the first time I watched it, and as I was taking notes, I rewound it like 3 times so I could write it down. And it's piranha.
Piranha. And he says they can skin a man's bones off in 20 seconds. And Lovely looks over at him, kind of glares at him. She's back upstairs from the cellar.
Yeah, she's like, why would you say that to my daughter? My daughter.
And right. And so Mo asks what Papa Doc feeds the piranha, and he points over at the goldfish. You feed those little babies to those gross, ugly things? And Papa Doc says, sure do. And he scoops up some of the goldfish. He goes, you want to feed them? And she gets really scared. And Lovely walks over to comfort her. He throws the goldfish back in the tank. He goes back to reading his newspaper while Lovely comforts the kid. Cut to Harvey brushing his teeth, talking to himself like he's talking to Papa Doc. He says, I don't need your job, Papa Doc, so you can take it, stick it. Cut to Ruth sitting in bed with Susan. Susan says, "Does he always do that? Does he always talk to himself that way?" And Ruth says, "It's the only way he can win an argument." Yeah. Harvey walks in and looks at them getting ready for bed. He calls over to Ruth and he goes, "She's going to sleep here tonight?" Ruth sits in the chair with her cocktail. And he goes, "What is she doing here?" Ruth says, "She's trying to sleep." Harvey says, "Look, I thought we don't get out that much. And I thought, being alone in the snow and the mountains." She shakes her head no. And she goes, "Not tonight."
She goes, "Harvey, I have a headache, a toothache, a backache, and I'm expecting the gout." And I'm just like, what the fuck? First off, what is the gout? And how do you expect it?
Ask our boy Fern, because he has it.
Does he get the gout?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got the gout. What is it? I just made Zach spit on his drink. But what is the gout?
Gout is it's like when you eat too much red meat or something.
Is your foot get inflamed or something?
I think it's like swollen. Yeah, swollen and painful.
Okay, but you know it's coming, so she's expecting the gout to come, essentially.
Yeah, because she's drinking like a fish.
God, Jesus, it's disgusting. I mean, Ruth she's not like a disgusting person, but I'm like, this is disgusting, though.
Well, they're clearly in a disgusting marriage. She hates him. She hates him, and he's just kind of a sad sack.
Yeah. And I mean, it's actually sad what happens because his death kind of makes her realize like, oh, maybe I did love him. She thinks that way until she turns into a Roman candle,
Right. Harvey says, "Will an aspirin help?" And she just kind of dismisses him and he leaves. Cut to Lovely, who's in Rick's room. As Rick is getting out of the shower, you see almost full frontal from Rick.
I thought we were going to see some balls or something hanging out.
You do see his head, the way his head actually is when his hair's not combed over like two eagle wings swooping in.
Jesus.
She throws a towel at him and he's like, "What do you want?" She goes, "I'm looking for Ralph." He goes, "Well, you're not going to find him here." He goes, "If Papa Doc catches you in here, it's going to get warm really quick." And she shakes her head. She starts coming on to him. He shakes his head and she's like, they're like doing this playful back and forth. He's shaking his head. She's nodding her head. She rips his towel off and he says, "You're getting somewhere and I'm getting nowhere." He picks her up like he's going to take her to his bed, but he throws her on her bed. And there's like one of those pocket doors in between the two rooms. And he slides the pocket door closed and he gives her like an air kiss and closes the sliding door. He's a good guy.
I mean, I guess. I like Rick. Honestly, I think he's got charisma. I like all the adults in this. I think they're fun in their own way. But yeah, she's thirsty, though. She needs to get some fucking D. Now, I do think that fucking Papa Doc lays down the pipe, but he might be a little bit like, I don't know, maybe intense. Maybe she wants, like it's all about him and he's going, he came and he's like moving on type of thing. I can see that. He's probably not a very generous lover.
What do you guys think? Vote on our Instagram. Go to our Instagram and you vote. Let us know.
Is Papa Doc a generous lover or not?
He's a generous lover. He's got lovely and he likes it. Cut to Rick. So it's cold in the house now.
Yeah, because the generator's off. And so Rick was taking a cold shower too and everything. So yeah. That's why the line of if Papa Doc catches us, it's going to get warm in here real fast. Right. But again, it's weird because the lights are on.
The generator. It's picky and choosy on what it wants to power.
Yeah.
It's powering the lights right now.
Yeah,
I don't know. Continuity is out the window with this movie, but
yeah, big time.
Rick goes to the generator room to check on it, check on Ralph. And when he does, he sees Ralph hanging from the generator with blood coming out of his mouth. He runs back to the house, grabs Papa Doc to go see it. Papa Doc just shakes his head. Papa Doc says, "How could he do such a thing like that?" Rick says, "We don't know that he did." Papa says he's going to call the police. Rick says the lines are still down. He tells Rick to drive the car into the village. Papa says he'll go check on the girls. Rick says we'll call it an accident.
I like how Papa Doc, he's not like an asshole. Like I feel like nowadays you would make this movie, and if it was remade, it would probably make it so that like Papa Doc's like, "Oh, I'm an upstanding member of the community. We can't tell anybody about this." But Papa Doc's first thought was, "We got to call the police." So I kind of like that. He kind of feels a bit more like a 3D character, like a real person, as opposed to just like this like I feel like nowadays, like I said, he would be like a perfect asshole now, whereas he's not. He's not an asshole. His first thought is, we got to go call the police. Well, we can't. Then we got to go drive to the village. Like, we got to get somebody here now. And it's not Papa Doc's fault that they can't get out of the house. And I think that, like, you remake this in 2024, and Papa Doc is going to kind of be like an antagonist as well.
Oh, totally. Well, in Harvey's, like, the whole time Harvey's like thinking it's just an accident.
Oh,
because
Rick? Oh, yeah, Harvey back at the house, yeah.
He wasn't, when they're back at the house. And he's like, we're too isolated. And it could have been one of us. And Rick is like, are you sure? Harvey's like, what do you mean? Rick says, what about those kids? Harvey laughs and he's like, you got to be kidding. Rick says, well, give it some thought.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I don't think, I like Rick's rationale. Like, I like that he's thinking out of the box, and immediately with Papa Doc, he's like, well, we don't know that Ralph didn't killed himself. We don't know that. But man, right. It's hard for me to say that I would really think that a bunch of 10 to 12-year-olds actually killed somebody. I'm kind of would probably be more on Harvey's side of things.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a quick cut of someone opening up the hood of the car. Quick cut back to Sister Hannah and Julie. Hannah's asking Julie if Ralph had a family. And Julie says, no, just us. Papa Doc took him out of one of his hospitals about 5 years ago, and he's lived with us ever since. And then there's a cut back to the car again and someone unplugging parts from the engine. Suddenly, Papa Doc and Rick are at the engine of the car. Rick says the rotor's gone. Brian and Mo show up. Doc says, hey, is David messing around with the car? And Brian says, negative. They look back at the engine of the car, and the kids walk off. Cut back to Rick inside the house. Julie says, you're back already. Rick says, someone's been messing with the car. I don't know what's going on around here, but we better get everybody together. And Julie says, I'll get everyone into the living room. And Rick goes to check upstairs. Cut to David wearing a wig, putting that green dress on, making himself look really pretty, combing his wig. While he's getting ready, you can overhear Rick and Harvey talking. And Rick is like, a rotor just doesn't disappear. And Harvey says, it can't be the children. Harvey says, there is something strange about that child, David, though. While he's overhearing this, he goes, you're all mine, Harvey Beckman. And he pulls off the wig, and now he's got his short hair again from earlier in the movie.
Yeah, it's kind of this thread doesn't really go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere, but it's so weird. You're like, what is going on right now?
Yeah. I love it.
But I'm so entertained.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's bonkers. This movie's fucking insane, and it's almost like you're like, and I guess this is a reshoot type of scenario because Leif Garrett's got the short hair, so it's just like you almost wonder what kind of movie this would have been if the director stayed through it all the way to the end and put it together. But I always get the feeling that, like, it wouldn't be as special as it is. Like, it wouldn't be Quentin Tarantino, like, one of his favorite films, if this was a smooth going, 90-minute, smooth movie. But no, it's this movie that has all these weird twists and turns, and a lot of them you feel like happen because of behind the scenes necessities,
Right.
But that's what makes this film fucking bonkers.
Yeah, totally agree.
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Have you been wondering where's the beef? Well, on our podcast, Throwback Trivia Takedown, you might just find that out, as well as some other things about the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
We're a nostalgic-based trivia show that pits two challengers head-to-head in a duel of the decades, with categories ranging from movies, TV, and music, to slang, food, and fashion. You're sure to get the best in retro-themed trivia.
So strap on your jelly shoes, grab a surge, and walk like an Egyptian to your favorite podcast app and check out Throwback Trivia Takedown.
I heard even Mikey likes it.
And now, back to the show.
From that scene, you fade to everyone sitting on the couch in the bar area, and Ruth is laughing and drinking, and Papa Doc's looking confused, and Rick and Julie are looking concerned. Lovely's laughing as well, standing up by a fireplace. And Harvey says, look, murder isn't a joking matter. And Ruth says, I'm laughing because when's the beer commercial gonna come on? And Julie says,
I feel like that's a dated reference.
Yeah, totally. And Julie says, who would want to do anything like that? And Ruth says, Papa Doc. Papa Doc says, listen, you boozed up old broad. And then Harvey interrupts and says, can't you leave her alone? And Ruth is blazed out of her mind. Suddenly, Ruth stops laughing and says, we got to get out of here. And Harvey says, how? Snow's 10 feet deep. Phone lines are dead. Ruth continues to drink. Harvey looks at Ruth and tells Ruth to pour a glass for him. But Ruth actually kind of likes it.
Yeah,
Ruth,
she's like, oh, okay.
Ruth gives Harvey her glass. She has the bottle of J&B. They cheers each other, and she takes a big old swig off the bottle. David, Brian, and Mo are back in that shed garage area, and they're looking at like a big blade, and they're making a trap with that. Cut back to the living room bar where the shotguns and the rifles were, and all of them are missing.
And by the way, there's only like 20 minutes left in the movie. It's not a lot.
No. Papa Doc and Rick argue about where they could be, and Rick says, I got to show you something else. And they go in the kitchen, and all the knives are missing. Rick says, you're going to have to butter your bread with a spoon. Papa Doc says,
Doc's like, that's not funny.
It's not funny. So now the guns and the knives are missing, and Harvey comes downstairs from the bedrooms, and Doc asks where he's been, and Harvey kind of ignores him. And suddenly Harvey stops and he looks at Papa Doc and he says, I want the San Francisco job. I want to have the new sanitarium. Twice the salary I'm getting now. And I want you to start treating my wife with respect. And I'm going to go out there and chop some wood because I feel like it, not because you told me to.
And I love how Rick kind of has like a little smirk on his face. Like you could tell like he's proud of Harvey for standing up for himself.
Right. Well, it's not going to last very long, Harvey. Cut to Harvey outside chopping wood. Suddenly David rolls up and asks if he can try. Harvey says, sure. And he gives the axe to David. Bad choice number one. And David starts trying to chop the wood, but he can't split the wood.
Oh, I mean, that's hard. It's not easy.
It's hard. And Harvey starts giving him shit. He's like, you're like an old lady. Put something into it. And he's just laughing at David as David's trying to chop. And he's like, if you can't do any better than that, I'll have to get Mo to help. Ha ha ha.
It's not like giving him too much shit though. Like, I get it. Like, you're not supposed to make fun of a kid, or whatever. But I think it's in good nature ribbing,
Well, yeah, because what ends up happening is David finally starts to split the wood, and Harvey's like, oh, great. He gets excited for him, right?
Yeah, he's happy for him. He did it.
Yeah, and he starts to bend down to adjust the wood. He's like, here, let me adjust it for you.
And then David says, let me ask you a question.
Oh!
I tried that joke 3 times in the Bloody Christmas episode.
And still doesn't work. No, I'm kidding. It works this time. It works this time because the scene slows down into slow motion.
Yep. Got to make that padding. Got to make it to 88 minutes, baby.
David goes behind Harvey and he slams the axe in the back of his head.
And it's interesting because like Harvey like looks up and the camera pauses. And then it does a post-production zoom in on Harvey's eyes that are just frozen this way. And I'm with you, buddy. I love it. I love the aesthetic of this film. I love the editing. And I do think it's, again, a lot of stuff happens, I think, out of necessity. I think a lot of the editing in this movie happens out of necessity. But the editor brought this movie together. And I think what we have is, again, we have this bonkers film that I think works because of its weird, wonky flaws.
I totally agree. Well, now Papa Doc and Rick are out there basically asking David what happened. And David says, it must have been George. George did it. Papa Doc asks where he went. And David says, I was so scared. I didn't see. And Doc tells him not to tell anybody while Rick adjusts Harvey and kind of gets him out of the snow.
And by the way, this whole scene is absolutely gorgeous because there's literally a foot or two of snow on the ground, but it must have just recently snowed because all the branches have a few inches of snow on them. It's beautiful. It's absolutely fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, I agree. And I did pick up on this too because Rick says they're going to take Harvey up to Ralph's room.
Okay, so maybe then that shed place or whatever. Oh, no, Ralph's room is what we see at the end of the movie. Okay, got it.
Cut to Ruth being consoled by Julie, and Ruth says, I called him gutless, called Harvey a lot of things, but when he told Papa Doc, and Rick just looks on and approves, and Ruth says, I was so proud. Rick says, you should have seen him. It was beautiful. Ruth says, I heard every word. Did you know I was going to leave him? About 100 times. I told him I couldn't stand him. Now he's gone. There's nothing. She shakes her head. Julie says, let's go downstairs. And Ruth says, I want to stay here. She's in her bedroom. Rick gives her a glass of alcohol to drink, and she just gives it back. Julie covers her with blankets. She takes Rick's hand. Rick says he's sorry, and Ruth says, I'm sorry too. Cut to Rick and Julie downstairs in the main living area of the house. And he says, look, if we take off now, we'll be looking behind every tree. We got to stay together in one room, and we'll start out in the morning. Papa Doc says, that's not a bad idea. Would you read about it in a book or someplace? Rick gets upset and says, why don't you do something better instead of sitting around sucking on that pipe, making smart-ass remarks, because Papa Doc's sucking on his pipe. And Papa Doc says, you never panic when you're scared.
He says, you never panic when you're scared, boy. And Rick goes, well, I am scared, boy. And I like that because that felt like genuine anger at that point, that they were actually butting heads right there.
Right. And then Lovely's in the room with them too. And she goes, well, if you're just going to sit here, I'm going to go take a bath and relax. Because if I don't, I'm never going to make it to morning. Cut to Mo in Lovely's bedroom. She's looking through Lovely's things, and Lovely walks in and says, what are you doing with my things? What are you doing in here? She starts shaking Mo. And she's holding Mo's stuffed animal now. And Mo's like, don't hurt my baby. Lovely throws the stuffed animal away. And she goes, I didn't do anything. I hate you. Lovely throws the stuffed animal out the door while Mo says, I hate you again.
Spoken like a true daughter of someone's, it's your mother right there.
Oh, it must have been really hard to act that scene, right?
Yeah. We've all said that to our mothers at some point.
Oh, boy. Sabatro. Cut to someone wearing red walking into Lovely's bathroom while she's taking a bath.
We get more boobies.
Suddenly, it's Sister Hannah, who pushes Lovely's head under the water and starts drowning Lovely. Meanwhile, Mo drops a piranha into the tub and starts eating Lovely.
So she's getting drowned while she's getting bit by the piranha. And apparently the piranha, according to one of the behind-the-scenes, documentaries, I think with the first AD guy, the guy that was married to Ruth in real life, apparently those piranha, I think they basically put them in the freezer to freeze them. And when they dropped them in the water, they basically came to life, and they really sort of bit her in there too.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's so many things wrong about everything they did there, Putting the fish in the freezer.
Can't be so wrong. Wow, that's wild. Well, while this is going on, Mo's yelling at Lovely to stop kicking or you'll hurt the babies. Mm-hmm. And Lovely is eaten to death.
Or drowned, one of the two, but yeah, all of the above.
And she's nude. Cut to Julie and Rick and Papa Doc, and they have a set of golf clubs. They're going to use them as weapons. Doc says, not much, but it beats nothing. They go into Lovely's bathroom, and they see that she's not there, but there's blood in the tub. Then you hear the kids talking outside. They look out the window of the bathroom, and they see that they've dragged the body through the window of the bathroom outside.
Oh, I guess they did technically drag her out the window. I
I
assume they dragged her out the front door, but that would have gone past everybody. So yeah, I guess it had to be out the window. It kind of doesn't really make sense, but yeah, exactly. So yeah, so her body, her naked body. So I didn't have Carolyn Stellar killed in the bathtub with piranha by her own daughter and the director's supposedly underaged albino girlfriend, then dragged nude through the woods by her son, Leif Garrett, on my Devil Times 5 bingo card. Wow.
Bingo.
Dude, I mean, seriously, by the way, that's her, naked, being dragged by kids, naked, in the snow, again, naked.
Yeah, neither did I. Neither did I.
Didn't see that coming at all.
And Papa Doc at this point lets out A little throwback to what's his face from Happy Hell Night, Darren McGavin from Christmas Story. Sons of bitches!
Sons, Papa says!
You leave her alone! Then he goes after them. Rick tries to stop Papa Doc.
Rick gets fucking like knocked out twice by Papa Doc in this scene.
So Rick, they run out through the kitchen of the house, and Rick goes to stop Papa Doc, and Papa Doc cold cocks Rick in the face, basically knocking him out.
I mean, he's definitely concussed.
Yeah. And then Rick, before he knocks him out, Rick's like, they got those guns. But it's too late. Rick gets knocked out. As he does, Ruth is following them saying, don't hurt them. Don't hurt them, please. Well, they just killed, not her friend, but they killed it. Lovely.
Yeah.
Doc runs after the kids and grabs a stick off the ground. He says, I'm going to kill every single one of you. Cut to Julie trying to wake up Rick, who's been knocked out. Julie calls to Ruth. Ruth just sits down in the kitchen panicked. Doc runs to Ralph's house.
It looks like it's probably just like a one bathroom studio with a kitchen. You know, there's no like living area there. It's almost like a studio, but it's like probably more of a bungalow cabin-y type of thing.
Right. And when he does, some of the kids are just playing on the ground, like Mo and Susan. He walks into the room, the door closes behind him, and once it does, you see Brian hanging from the rafters on some sort of swing, but the base of the swing is that sling blade thing that they were looking at earlier, saying it like cuts grass.
Oh, the sheath or whatever. Yeah. Scythe or whatever.
And David's behind Brian on the swing to give him more momentum, and he swings down, and the blade goes right into Papa Doc's chest.
Yeah,
killing
awesome.
Papa Doc.
And it kind of knocks him into the glass of the door as well. But yeah, it goes right into him. I was like, oh, it's kind of elaborate, but at the same time, I feel like it's something that a kid would do, or a crazy kid would do.
A crazy kid. And Brian even says, he's like, see, I told you it would work.
Yeah.
Cut back to Julie and Rick, and then Julie apparently has a psychic link to her dad because she already knows he's dead at this point, even though she never saw him get killed.
Yeah, that's the little weird things about this movie.
Again, it's weird, but
yeah, it's 88 minutes. It's weird.
Yeah, come on, guys.
We've got like 15 minutes left.
Right. Cut back to Brian and David. Brian's giving orders to David, and they're all holding shotguns and rifles. Cut to Brian giving Susan a rifle, and they're all arguing to each other where they killed Papa Doc. And then you see David and Brian filling up a pot full of gasoline. Cut back to Ruth, panic-stricken on the couch in the living room of the main house. And as she is, David and Brian walk by her in the living room up the stairs.
Yeah,
she's drunk and out of her mind. She doesn't even know that the boys are walking by her.
Yeah.
But then she gets startled and she goes, "Where's Susan?" And then they're holding the pot of gasoline, and David goes, "She's in the kitchen, and she needs you badly." And Ruth gets up to go run into the kitchen as the boys bring the gasoline upstairs. Ruth goes into the kitchen, and then she goes outside where Susan's standing out there waiting for her. Hannah's hiding in the trees watching with a rifle. Rick comes out of the kitchen as well to try to pull Ruth back inside the house, but Hannah shoots at Rick, almost hitting him. Rick goes back inside the house.
Yeah, and fucking Ruth doesn't even flinch when that rifle, that bullet shoots right past her. Yeah, she's like, that's probably the DTs.
Right. Ruth walks up to Susan. She's like, "Please, I don't understand." Meanwhile, David and Brian are upstairs in the house looking down on Ruth out the window. And Susan says, we're not going back. We're not going to get locked up again. Susan says, "You didn't love me."
And it's weird because Ruth goes like, "I love you." And it's like, you just met her yesterday or today or however. I don't know. I'm not sure on the timeline.
To be fair, her husband is now dead and she's drunk out of her gourd. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And right after she says this, Brian and David dump the gasoline on top of Ruth. And Susan uses her lighter and sets Ruth on fire. Susan goes up in flames as the kids look on.
Dude, it's the most brutal death in the movie, to be honest with you. Holy
sure
shit.
is. It sure is.
She's like running around. It's a good stunt, too. It's a full body burn stunt, and the kids are kind of running around the stunt guy and everything.
Yeah, you see the stunt guy has like the blanket over his head.
Oh yeah,
he's
he's
but
got the full thing.
It doesn't
yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter
care.
at all. It's so I don't care either. It's so violent and it's so like juicy violent. It's so brutal. You're like, these kids just set her on fire. This would pair really well with Home Alone, by the way.
Yeah, right. the
This
two
is like
sides of the coin.
the
you know,
real Home Alone,
Well,
right?
It makes me want to watch. Have you ever seen that movie? It's like, I think it's called like The Children, where they get like these kids get irradiated, and then they go to hug their parents, and it melts or burns up the parents or something like that.
I think so. Is that a 70s movie too?
It's another 70s movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, that one was banned. I think Troma put it out at one point or reissued it.
Okay.
Yeah,
they
I
got
do
the
wanna
rights
see
to
that.
that one or something.
Yeah, this is the moment in the movie where you're like, okay, so they kill Papa Doc. That was kind of comical. This one's just straight up brutal.
Brutal. I mean, like, Susan, the little girl, is just, I mean, she just blank face, just let Ruth on fire. It's like, okay, all right.
So Julie and Rick see this happen.
They're like, holy shit.
And Julie's like saying to Rick, we got to help her. And Rick says, there's nothing we could do. We got to get out of here.
Burning. And like the sound mixing is great because as they're running through the basement, you can faintly hear Ruth screaming like upstairs, you know? So it's like, but I like how Rick's like, ain't nothing we can do about her. She is gone.
Yeah. And the kids are dancing around Ruth, basically singing like London Bridges.
Yeah.
With this twisted kids music playing as well. Cut back to Rick and Julie, who are still looking for a place to get out of the house. They're now running through the woods. They run down to the lake, and there's a boat down there, and they're trying to get the boat free so they can go get on the lake. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But the kids see them and start shooting at them with rifles, so they have to run back into the house.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't pan out at all, but you know, it's kind of necessary to again,
a cool idea.
Pad a couple minutes into the runtime, you know?
I'm okay with that. That makes total sense to me that there would be,
yeah,
they'd be near the lake. They run back into the house and they run up into one of the bedrooms at the top floor, and they barricade themselves in the room with a chair and a bed. A very light chair and light bed, by the way.
Well, but they are 12-year-old kids, so it doesn't really matter.
Suddenly the power goes out. Rick says, we're going to be okay. We'll stay here until the snowplow gets here. Cut back to the kids who are setting up a new trap outside of the house with a rifle pointing at the front door of the house that leads out of the house.
Yeah, like if you open the door, you'll pull the trigger.
It's what in Phantasm 2, the reverse of when inside the house when Reggie and Mike set up the shotgun or the grenade in the door where you pull and boom. Yeah.
Yep.
Kids make their way upstairs. Rick hears them. They kind of fiddle with the door and they realize they can't get in their room, and they say, the kids go back downstairs, and you hear Brian say, we'll move out at daybreak. Brian tells the group to go back to Ralph's house to get some shut-eye. Cut to the next day, and there's a ladder set up on the house, and the ladder's leaning up towards the window where Julie is sleeping. David's coming up the ladder. Julie wakes up to look out the window, and David throws a spear through the window, going through Julie's neck and killing her instantly.
Yeah, it's like a makeshift spear with like a knife on the end of a stick. And yeah, Leif Garrett just like throws it right through the glass window, and it
straight
goes
to her jugular,
right into her neck. Yeah, and fucking, of course, you know, Rick wakes up. He's like, holy shit, takes it out of her neck. I wish there was like spraying of blood everywhere, but I do like the fact that there's no gurgle, there's no nothing. Like, she's dead. She dies like right away.
She's dead. When Rick gets startled, it rattles the ladder, which causes David to slide down the ladder and cut his face. And Rick is lost it. He's
like,
snapped.
He's like trying to reach out through the window, but it's too small for him. But his hands are all like covered in blood. He's like, "Oh, fucking kill you!" And David's
kill each
like,
and every one of you little bastards.
I know, and I'm like, and at this point, you want him to, like, you're with him, you know, you're with Rick. But then David's like, "You cut my beautiful face," and there's so much here that, like, yeah, I do think Donna's right. A remake would be interesting because I do think you could flesh out some of these little terrors a little better, but I do love what we have, you know? And you know, so yes, David's like, Leif Garrett's like, my face, you know, it's a little cut. It's no big deal though.
It's a little cut, but it shows you how deranged these kids are.
Yeah.
They're so, you know, so deranged, so crazy. And folks, this isn't going to have a happy ending because
No.
Rick's still alive.
He's the last one.
The kids yell to each other, let's go back to the snowman, and they run off. Several moments later, Rick's still alive, but the kids are running around Papa Doc, who's now buried in the snow up to his neck, and they're using him as a snowman.
Yeah, that's
Hannah looks
so
on
morbid.
It's so morbid. Hannah looks on with a red blanket wrapped around her. Rick looks out the window and sees them having a snowball fight around Papa Doc's dead body. Rick makes his way downstairs to look out the window, and he sees the rifle at the door. He looks at another window and he sees skis. So he opens up the side door next to where the shotgun door was, right?
And I love this. I love that he wasn't, he didn't fall for the shotgun kill. I was like, okay, cool, good. He's smart. But you know what? You know who's smarter than Rick or me? Because I didn't see this coming, is the kids.
Damn right. So he starts to walk out of the door to get the skis. And as he does, there's snow everywhere on the ground. And what he doesn't realize, and he is about to step into, is a bear trap clamping on his leg. He falls to the ground, and when he does, another bear trap clamps onto his arm.
Dude, I was like, holy fucking shit. And then another one, he goes for his left arm, puts it down, and boom, another fucking bear trap. I didn't see this shit coming at all.
The kids run up and see him stuck on 3 bear traps.
He's like, ah! He's like, ah!
So they're not like serrated. They're just like flat.
Yeah.
Which will basically they'll break your leg or break your arm, but they won't cut it.
Yeah.
And so he's struggling. He's calling them bastards. They dance around him as he looks on. Susan
and then
walks.
Hannah, this is like the first time you see Hannah without her like her habit on, and she does have like that white albino hair.
She has, so Hannah walks up behind her, no longer wearing her habit or that red blanket. She gets on top of Rick from behind and slashes his throat with a knife while screaming, "You killed it! You killed it!" And now Rick is dead.
What was she referring to? Well,
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's
Continuity is not our friend in this one.
And it's got to be noted, bro. Like the blood in this is that thick red paint blood that, look, as a kid, I didn't love it. And I do think like the era of Tom Savini and everything is a much better era of gore. But I do love my 70s, like bright paint red blood.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Now now that Rick is dead, you cut back to Brian marching around a dead Papa Doc. Brian gets called up to the house. Brian salutes Papa Doc and runs off. Cut to Ralph's house, Ralph's quarters. All the bodies are sitting around a table.
This is so freaky. This is such an eerie ending.
So eerie. And this is one of the things I love about 70s movies. All the dead bodies are in this room sitting around a table, all dressed up to look like dolls.
Mm-hmm.
David says at one point, "Who's going to be my new husband?" And he's all dressed in drag. David's yelling at Harvey Beckman and he says, "Checkmate, Harvey Beckman." Susan kicks a chair and says, "I don't like it here anymore. Game's over." And Brian says, "We're moving on to a new area since it's freezing out here." And Mo starts crying, says, "I don't want to leave." And Hannah says, "It's going to be all right. You're going to have some brand new toys soon. I promise you." The camera slowly zooms in on all the dead adults as the kids give them kisses and walk off. As the title card says, "The Beginning."
That was so cool, bro.
And
the beginning.
Ends. And that is how the movie ends.
Dude, so much fun. This movie is so much fun. We've said it multiple times, it's not perfect, and I don't want it to be, when I watch a movie like this, it's such an oddity. Like, this film is an oddity, and it shows like what you can like sort of put together, even though, like everyone behind the scenes didn't really see eye to eye or something like that. But it's interesting to see these kind of movies come out of such conflict behind the scenes, you know, and it's interesting to see how you sort of like put it together. But like, I love this film. I thought it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of shit that I didn't see it coming. I didn't see a piranha death coming. Like, I didn't think that was going to be a fucking kill, you know? And then like fucking even Rick at the end getting it the way he got it. I mean, I didn't expect all the adults to live. I kind of expected them all to die, but I kind of forgot about it. And by the end, I was like rooting for Rick, you know, to do something. And then he doesn't do anything. He goes down and he stays down, essentially, you know? So it's an interesting film, dude. It's really interesting. I'm so glad you brought it to the table. And I mean, I see the aesthetic. Like, last week when you were talking about how, like, what's a crystal movie or whatever, I think, Zach, at this point, you know what a crystal movie is. You know what a Corey movie is. And I got to say that I kind of have an idea of what a Zach movie is, and this sits up there with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. Like, Zach likes his... It's not perfect. There's these oddities to them. There's, like, this oddballness to it. And I know you love that shit. And so do I, man. I think it's great.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, these movies... movies like this have a very similar thread to me, where maybe like 3/4 or half the movie is slow and it's a build up, you know, to a huge climax, shocking climax. You know, the movie Deranged with which is basically about Ed Gein, which will come to Pat eventually. It's a 70s movie. I think it's out of print at the moment. But I may just have to pull the trigger on that movie down the road with you, even though it's not available physically. Same deal, where it's like a very slow burn, slow build, and then at the end, it just hits you over the head like a sledgehammer, and you're like, what just happened? I love movies like that. That's not my favorite genre, but for Pat, it's particularly perfect because it's just like, where are we going with this? Where are we going? Oh, this is where we're going with this. Oh, heavens, the Murgatroyd. It's just like wild. So this movie, the last 20 minutes of the movie are just insane.
Yeah.
Where it's like one crazy moment after another. And you're like, there's little kids doing this right now?
Yeah.
Which makes it even more crazy.
And what I love about it is like, the kids, like we've watched, you know, Village of the Damned. We watched that for the Carpenter Factor. Go check it out on Patreon. And I mean, that's kind of like what I think the template is for crazy kids, you know, whereas like even when they're not killing somebody, you can tell that there's something wrong with them. Here, like, I love that they act like kids when they're not killing somebody, they act like kids. And then after they kill somebody, they act like kids by turning them into like a snowman or something. Like, they did a good job of making the kids feel like kids in this movie. And that's what makes it scarier. That's what makes this scarier to me than Children of the Damned or Village of the Damned. Because you're like, yeah, I get it. Like, they're crazy, they're bad, they're evil. Like, I get it. Whereas here, like, you think you can rationale with them, you can connect with them. Maybe you can connect with them over chess or connect with them over something else. But no, ultimately, they're gonna kill you.
Yeah, they're gonna kill you. And you know, this movie's very bleak.
Yeah,
but it's 70s bleak. It's not now bleak where you're like, ugh, feels heavy and depressing. This feels just like at the end of it, you're like, I can't believe I just watched this. And it's it's going to leave you with lingering effects. But those lingering effects are going to turn into like, I think I really like that movie. The more you sit with it. Initially, everyone's going to watch this movie. If you haven't seen it yet, you're going to watch it. It's free on YouTube, by the way. You're going to watch this and you're going to go like, I don't think I like that movie, but just sit with it. You're going to realize, oh, I really did like that movie.
Sometimes it takes like sitting with a film, you know, for it to actually like you realize what kind of an effect it had on you. But there is also the Vinegar Syndrome 4K. Did you pick that up or did you just watch the YouTube or did you have the Code Red version?
I have the Code Red version. And you can find that on eBay for like under $10.
Okay.
So it's from what I've heard, it's all the same stuff. It's just not the 4K edition.
Right. Yeah, and not gonna lie, the Vinegar Syndrome 4K looks great. It's a great looking transfer.
Yeah, and when I saw this at the Arrow, it was a 35 millimeter print, and it looked terrible, which is good, which is good. So when I watched it again, I was like, oh, look how beautiful this looks now.
But this is the perfect kind of movie, a movie that I would expect us to have seen at the New Beverly for their Tuesday double feature or Grindhouse double feature night or whatever, that you and I went to a couple of those, but I can totally see this being one of those movies that pops up there.
Yep. And don't be surprised if I bring another Grindhouse favorite down the road soon.
Yeah. But this was a great way to end 2024, man. Like,
I agree.
Like this month, Crystal's movie pick, and it's a movie that I love too, is a bit newer, but it's nice to kind of go out on a cult movie. This is a cult movie, and we are a cult movie podcast, and it's kind of the perfect way to end 2024. But it won't be our last episode of 2024. Zach and I are going to do a wrap up after dark, and as he mentioned earlier, you can go over our Patreon page. Every month we do a wrap up after dark for our lowest tier, the $2 tier, but you also get every episode of our show ad free, and usually a few days early, depending on when I've gotten a chance to edit it, but usually comes early, usually ad free. And then if you want to bump it up to the $5 tier, you get the tour de force, which you get an entire 2 years and a handful of months worth of content for the Carpenter Factor. And then right now, Zach and I are actually kind of getting to the end of the Coscarelli Factor. So you have Don Coscarelli's entire catalog as well that we've gone through, and we go through all of these in order, and we don't necessarily break down the movies, but we when we talk about them as a part of the auteur's whole catalog type of thing, and where they're going and where they've been type of thing. So, thank you all so much for supporting that. And of course, at the highest tier, people like Crystal and Rob and Paulette and Cam and everybody and Aaron in the past and whatnot have, you can pick a movie for us to review. And honestly, I may have to cap it because we're getting to the point where almost every one of our movies is a movie that our patrons pick, which, I mean, thank you guys. Like that means a lot. That means you like what we're doing. So thank you so much. Next movie, I think next month is going to be 2 movies that patrons pick, and then February and March. So it's kind of a treat for Zach to be able to pick a movie here. And Devil Times 5 was a great pick. So thank you to all our patrons, and thank you to Zach for bringing this one to my attention. I love it, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I want to remind everybody, obviously, clearly, as a producer of the show, if you sign up for the highest tier of Podcasting After Dark, you choose the movie. We'll break down the movie you choose, and we will be doing that in January. But I also like to highlight lesser known movies, or movies that fly under the radar. This movie definitely flies under the radar. Nobody talks about this movie. And yeah, Quentin Tarantino talked about how much he liked it, but nobody talks about this movie. So this is definitely a deep cut, and you can be a deep cut picker. Paulette, for example, picked a movie called Knockabout, which is like a very obscure martial art movie to people who are mainstream martial art lovers. And then people who are not, or like, what's this movie? I've never heard of it before, or like Cam picking The Believers. That's a very obscure, like satanic thriller. So you just go outside the box. Whatever you want to do, you can pick totally mainstream. One of the movies we have coming up in January is super mainstream, but that's
But it still has ties to the 80s, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm really excited about it because honestly, I've never seen it before, so I'm stoked to watch it for the first time and break it down with Corey. So yeah, you guys can pick whatever you want. I just wanted to highlight Devil Times 5 as a closeout to 2024. It's my way of saying the world's gonna be all right because the kids are gonna take over someday.
Yeah, perfect, buddy. Perfect. And so can you, since this is coming at the very end of the month, can you let everybody know what's going on in the new year with $2 late fee? I know you've mentioned before that Dustin is taking a bit of a hiatus. So what do you have planned in his absence in January?
Well, we normally take the month of January off on $2 late fee and just fill it with extra programming. Like, panels that we did at LA Comic-Con, for example. That was one thing we did last year. I believe the year before as well. So this year is going to be a little bit different because, as you may or may not know, everyone, Dustin is taking an extended leave from the show. He will be back in some degree throughout the year, but he's taken some time off to recalibrate and figure out what other things he wants to do. So, things are going to look a little bit different on $2 late fee. So I can tell you right now, we are starting a new show live on YouTube in January called Versus. Corey will be joining me for the inaugural episode of Versus. It's a debate show. So it will be like GoBots versus Transformers. GoBots versus Transformers.
I'm going to leave that in because I don't know how you just said Transformers. The first time you're GoBots versus Transformers.
Because it's 11 o'clock.
He hasn't even drank anything.
No, I'm drinking a Ghost, baby.
Ghost.
It's going to be, High C versus Kool-Aid. Everything from the 80s. It's going to be a similar tie-in to, obviously, $2 late fee, which is an 80s nostalgic movie podcast, but also 80s Kids Unite. And Corey and I will be debating a particular topic. It'll be live on YouTube. You fans who will be watching, you listeners who will be watching, you watchers who will be watching, will vote at the end on who made the more convincing case. Whoever that winner is, whichever side chose the winning vote. If you're a patron, you will receive a prize. If you're not a patron, you will win. You will just receive the glory of knowing you won. But we will basically tally up the totals, who voted, who won. I will take a random winner from our Patreon to win a particular prize on $2 late fee. That'll be a live show we'll be doing in January.
I'm excited for that, man. And it's and like you said, it's a debate show. So like, even if I don't necessarily agree, I'm still going to defend my side as if, it was all encompassing.
Exactly. And the Night Boys will be the regular, debaters on the show. Potentially patrons will come on as well and do it too, that down the road, if the show continues to be successful and be fun. Another tease I'm going to be doing, another preview for non-patrons, is Legends of the Territories. It's a special show that Paul and I are going to be doing on our Patreon, where we highlight specific wrestlers from the territory regions of the 80s and talk about them. So I'll be dropping a free episode of that so people can check that out in the month of January as well. And there's a lot of other fun stuff. So lots to come with $2 late fee. Oh my gosh. 2025 is going to be a wild year. Lots of things, lots of surprises in store.
Well, as a $2 late fee patron myself, I'm looking forward to all of that content. I'm also looking forward to the Legends of the Territories and everything. So I'm a big fan of Territory Marks and Paul London and everybody. And by everybody, I mean you, I guess.
Well, man, I got to tell you, we got some big stuff cooking. I just can't really talk about it just yet.
Sure. No, I get it. But thank you all so much for supporting the show in 2024. You guys all rock. And thank you, Zach, for always bringing the heat. And Devil Times 5, a.k.a. Peopletoys, a.k.a. The Horrible House on the Hill, was definitely the heat that you brought in this cold, cold winter month. But as always,
we'll catch you on the dark side, you little bastards.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.
I'm John, and I'm the host of Action Action. Every week, I'm joined by James.
Heyo.
And Dustin.
Hello.
And each week, we review, debate, and rank a different action movie.
We're creating the ultimate list of action movies.
From awful to awesome.
So if you want to hear 3 more white guys with beards talk about action movies.
And argue about where they belong on our list.
and decide you hate us because we made fun of your favorite movie.
Join us every Tuesday, and you can find us on your favorite podcatcher.
And Steven Seagal is a joke.